I started that urban farming business on $7,000. I went from nothing to being a commercial farmer. And I remember the first time I ate my own lettuce and spinach from the garden, I was completely overwhelmed with emotion. The leaner the farm got, the more I just focused on high rotation stuff. And that's when my farm actually became the most profitable. We would bring in over $100,000 of revenue on a quarter acre. If you're in the apartment, start with the balcony garden, maybe some inside growing lights, then talk to some other friends that are along the same mindset, and then go get a lease on a piece of land and start a community farm. You have to be just prepared to accept that you will fail. And if you're not willing to fail forward, you won't last.
This has been a long time coming, so thank you for being here.
Yeah.
I'd like to just get into your background and what led you to farming in the first place, because that story, I've heard it personally, and it's pretty interesting story.
Yeah.
Because like the only experience, if you want to call it that, from my understanding that you had of any farming-esque thing was tree planting.
Pretty much.
Which I guess is like a rite of passage in Canada.
Yeah, it is actually. Yeah.
Like, do a lot of people do that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like as a high school job?
College job.
College job, okay.
Yeah, totally. So I spent most of from the time I was 16 till even still today, I was a musician, and that's all I really wanted to do. I was in a punk rock band when I was 16, and we were touring in the US.
Wow.
This is before...
As a 16-year-old.
Yeah, this was 1996. We were getting in a van and driving to Seattle and playing punk rock shows.
Wow.
So, grew up in Kelowna, BC, Canada, which is about 4 hours from Vancouver, the West Coast, but fairly close to the border. So we just had this thing. We knew bands in Spokane and Seattle, mostly Tacoma, those areas. And
I used to live near Spokane, actually.
Yeah. And
I lived in Moscow, Idaho.
Yeah. Beautiful area.
Yeah, beautiful area.
Very similar to BC and what I'm used to in southern BC. Grew up that way. Just an anarchist punk rocker. I was listening to Noam Chomsky, the Dead Kennedys, and I was into the whole anarcho-syndicalism idea and all that. Still sort of idealistic because I hadn't been an entrepreneur that had to go out and work. So I had these like delusions of grandeur to some degree. Pursued a degree in music that I didn't finish. And then that led to me moving to Montreal and really just going all in. I discovered jazz in my early 20s and just became obsessed and pretty much went that road. I tried to build a career as a gigging musician and writing film music, being a film composer. I had the whole studio set up, keyboards, analog synths, and I was doing early sampling and stuff like that. And then from the time I was 16 years old and on, my dad was blackpilling me. My dad told me about the Freemasons and the Knights of Malta and all of that shit at an early age. And literally from the time I was 16 years old, my dad was telling me it's 5 seconds to midnight. So I grew up with sort of a prepper mindset, but also felt unempowered by it because I watched him be unempowered and he was just angry all the time.
Got it.
And so...
Angry and paranoid
and bitter and jaded and getting in fights and struggling with alcoholism.
Did he have sort of a mindset too of like, oh, it's happening next year, the FEMA camps?
Every single year since I was 16 and he woke up to it. When 9/11 happened, he called me the next day. I was in my first year of music school in college and he's like, it's all bullshit. Can we swear on the show?
Yeah, of course.
It's all bullshit. This whole Osama bin Laden narrative is nonsense. He knew right out of the gate.
So that's a good side of it.
It was. And that was the real beginning of my journey because now I'm in adulthood. I'm in school. I'm on my own, paying my own way, tree planting. Uh-huh. So I would go tree planting in the Canadian bush for 2 or 3 months a year. I put myself through school that way. And then I formed a band in school. And then we moved out east. We lived in a town called Guelph, Ontario, which is close to Toronto. We didn't want to live in Toronto, so we lived in Guelph. All the band lived in a house. We just played music and just jammed and just really went for it. And then moved to Montreal the next year. I lived there for 7 years and just went for it, gigging, touring, living that lifestyle, always on. In my band, I was the primary songwriter. I was the manager. I fired people in the band. They used to call me the Hammer because I was good at being an asshole. And so 2008 rolls around and the economic crisis that happened in that time really shook me out of my stupor. And I was getting tired of the Montreal music scene and just partying and all that. And I was like, I need to make a change. And I remember I had this vision of, and I'd been obsessed with permaculture and things like this for many years prior.
Was that because of tree planting?
Tree planting kind of got me into it because when I was out in the bush planting, I encountered a lot. It's kind of hippie, but not totally, because it's like hippies that work hard.
Yeah.
So it's like smoking weed every morning and working, but you're working hard. Like I was so obsessed with my tree planting that I had it in spreadsheets. And this is like the generator in me too. Like I had daily goals, and I had a goal at the end, and I was like, I need to make $25,000 in these 2 months. And 25 grand in the early 2000s was quite a bit of money.
That's a lot.
I used to be able to go back and live in Montreal for the other 10 months of the year on that money. Montreal was so cheap back then, but I had these goals. I wanted to do this and buy this new guitar or whatever. And I was just super motivated for it. And when 2008 rolled around, I just got really burnt out on the scene. And so I just said, forget it. I'm going to leave. I met a guy named Jay. We became pretty good friends in our last 2 years of tree planting. And he rode his bike down the West Coast and went through Texas, like rode across Western Texas and went to Georgia, Louisiana, you name it. And I was inspired by that. And this was around the time of Hurricane Katrina. And so I was really motivated at that time to ride down the West Coast, basically from Kelowna all the way down the West Coast. And I was going to go and volunteer in the relief effort for Katrina. And that was just kind of something I wanted to do. I wanted to help out. I wanted to contribute. And what I did on this journey was I just visited farms and off-grid homesteads. And I was just kind of getting my feet wet because I knew about this stuff, but I'd never done any of it. I was just inspired, and I was watching videos in the early days of videos. There wasn't a lot of content out there, but I saw stuff, I read books, and I just did that. And I planned this trip. I was doing the thing called woofing, Wheeling Workers on Organic Farms, where it's like there's a network, and it used to be a book. You'd buy the book for $40, you'd sign up, and then I think they would vet you. And then you could reach out to people and say, hey, I'm this person and I'm coming on this trip. I'd love to stop by your farm for a week and help and learn. And so I kind of had this trip where I was visiting farms in Oregon and California, and I was doing this. And this is where I started to see what people were doing on the land. And it was kind of the stuff in Santa Rosa, Northern California, that I saw inspired me the most.
What was so inspiring about it at the time?
It was just like, people were just doing it. Like people were just living by their values. This is before woke, right?
Yeah.
The world is so different then. You could hang out with people that had different ideas than you, and it wasn't a deal breaker in a relationship, you know? And so I met all kinds of interesting people. And mostly what I was inspired by on that trip was my capacity to just throw myself out into the world and just see what happens. And riding a bike by yourself, riding 60, 80 miles a day, just pedaling, on the California coast, catching waves of winds coming up from Big Sur, pushing you down, riding, going so fast, like just 40 miles an hour, like on a bike, right? And then just showing up at a homestead and just bringing value to people. I just felt, wow, I didn't know I had this in me to just be a beacon of inspiration just by myself showing up. Mm-hmm. And I really learned how to be in the world on that trip. And it was 2.5 months I spent just stopping along the way. By the time I got to Tijuana, I ended in Tijuana, I was just like, I think I'm ready to just do it now. So I just kind of gave up on this whole idea of riding through. And people were saying, you do not want to ride through Western Texas. You'll die. So I was like, just from the heat, right?
Yeah.
And so I said, okay, fuck that. I'm just going to go home and I'm going to start this urban farm. And so I went home and I just felt I was physically like peak shape, like riding 60, 80 miles a day, just lean, mean machine. Like I just felt so distilled in my mind and just ready to execute. Go back to Kelowna. I start this urban farm. It's all by bike. So I'm pulling these trailers. I had them all custom built. I'm pulling my BCS walk behind tractor. And people were just like, this guy's fucking nuts.
Yeah.
But they thought it was so cool.
Your urban farm, was it, how many acres was it on?
It was, it fluctuated. It went from 1/4 acre to 2 acres back to 1/4 acre.
Okay.
And it was when it went back to 2 acres, that's when I really figured out this model. And then that's when I wrote my book, The Urban Farmer, in 2016.
Got it.
And then that was the model, super distilled, like focused crops, serving high-end markets, farmers markets, some CSAs, but mostly me just selling to restaurants and grocery stores. And then I kind of, refined that model.
Okay. And what was the inspiration though from like seeing that lifestyle to like, no, I'm going to do this lifestyle as best I can? Like what was the driving factor behind that?
I just felt I would do a lot of daydreaming on that bike trip. I would just ride and just get into this zone. There's this one day, I still remember it like it was yesterday. I was riding, I was on my way to, I was leaving Portland, Oregon. I met this person. I stayed in Portland, Oregon. She let me stay at her house for a few days, explored Portland. I was really stoked. And then I was like, I got to carry on the road. So I rode from Portland to Lincoln City, and I had this bad left knee from tree planting. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of a reoccurring injury. And I was riding, and there was this big uphill climb on that day, and my knee was just fucking throbbing, dude. And I was like, I don't know if I can, I was almost ready to throw in the towel. And I just remember I had this like sheer force of will surge over me. And I was like, and I could start to smell the ocean because I was coming up the crest of this uphill climb for hours, low gear, pulling all my equipment. And I could start to smell the ocean, and I just felt like revitalized, and I just pushed through. And then I rode the last like 3 or 4 hours of that day because it was slightly downhill with one leg, and I was clipped in. And so I just rode with one leg. I got to Lincoln City. The injury never came back.
Interesting.
It was crazy. And I remember that day being like, with my will, and just be and accepting of my situation and being like, forget the pain. This is what you're supposed to experience right now in this moment. I just overcame it, and that injury has never come back since then.
Amazing.
And it was in that moment where I just felt absolutely inspired to do whatever my dreams took me to.
Okay.
And that was the thing. And I didn't even know what it was at that time. But then when I finished the trip, I was like, I know what it is now. I'm going to do this urban farm. And I just went back and executed.
Got it.
I just did it. And I just like it went in different waves over the 8 years that I did it. Had partners, went scaled up, 8 employees, scaled down, stripped it down to it was just me and 2 other guys. And then I felt like I was done with it. You know, like I did it for 8 years.
You showed proof of concept.
I showed proof of concept. I traveled the world. This is how, like, sometimes you're just at the right place at the right time. Mm-hmm. And my, political, even spiritual mindset has kind of always been the same, but political outlook on the world changed a lot in that it evolved. Because I was probably still sort of liberal and leftist, but I was never woke. But I was like, I believed in this utopia of the system could help people. And I still believe that to some degree, just the details matter, That's what's changed. But I was just, I just felt I'm going to do this. And I'm done with it when it was done. And all these things, like I was touring the world after my second year of farming because I was in such the right place at the right time. People were calling me from San Francisco being like, we heard about your farm. And I wasn't blogging. They would just hear about it. There was some stuff online, but not a lot. It was just people were starving for this thing. And I kind of learned then how to follow serendipity. Mm-hmm. And so I've always had this thing when I notice synchronicity, and even on the drive up, Jesse Elder and I are in the truck, and we're talking about all these things, and we just saw signs, like we were talking about foundations and trust. Hey, look at the road sign, foundation. We're listening to Snarky Puppy, and I'm getting into all this jazz, and I'm just like synchronicity. And so whenever I see that, I just follow it. Uh-huh. It's like if I stub my toe 3 times in the morning, okay, I'm not doing something right.
Yeah.
But I follow these things, and with the farming thing, I was consulting, I was public speaking. By the time it was almost over, I had already been ushered into the next thing, which was public speaking, building online platforms, and writing a book. And I was like, I think I'm just ready to kind of just drop this and go in this direction for a while and trust in God that if I follow the right signs, I'll find it.
It'll make it happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to put yourself back in, or I want you to put yourself back in that state of, I'm just going to do it. And then you just did it when it came to building your urban farm, because I feel like when it comes to any homesteading, farming, gardening-esque thing, so many people struggle, especially in this era of social media where there's influencers everywhere that show you their perfect farm, but they don't show you
all the struggle,
labor and the struggle that it took to get to that point. Yeah. And most people look at that and they're like, that's too fucking overwhelming. I'm just not even going to take a crack at it. Like they really want to. They're like, I know I should grow my own food, whether they're in an apartment, they just have a balcony, or they're doing microgreens inside with some lights, whatever it is, they know deep inside that they need to, but they get in this sort of free state. Whereas you, maybe it helped that you weren't sort of in this internet age of like social media.
Maybe.
And you're just like, I'm just going to do it. And then you did, right?
Yeah.
So the first thing I want to talk about with that is your failures and things you would have done differently versus the things that you got right, and just the whole process of developing an urban farm. Because most people right now probably relate in terms of their financial abilities to being able to urban farm rather than get a homestead. And I do want to talk about getting land and stuff like that later during this episode, but just practically speaking, where people are at, urban farming, okay, it's been done. You showed proof of concept. So how is it done?
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I remember the first year I launched the farm and did it. I worked so hard. This is, just part of my personality, and later, having a wife and kids and stuff changed it, because then you have that support network. You know what that's like. I would literally work myself into a stupor. Mm-hmm. I would work myself to absolute physical exhaustion where I would forget to eat or drink water and I would collapse. And I remember in the first kind of 3 months of the first growing season, screwing so many things up. Kelowna is hot. It's probably one of the hottest places in Canada, and the summers are hot and dry. By the way,
how hot are we talking in Fahrenheit?
We're talking 104 Fahrenheit.
Sometimes, like
absolutely.
Wow.
Not quite as humid as Texas, but getting close because it's on the lake, and it gets socked into with the heat, so you don't get the breeze. But just being so exhausted and I remember this one time I was like literally so physically exhausted. I went home and I'm like, I'm going to make lunch. I have to eat. And I just passed out and I'm on the floor in the fetal position, like crying, going, I can't wait till this is easier.
Uh-huh.
And just being, I can't wait till I'm better at this, where I'm not in this absolute stupor of exhaustion. But you just kind of push through, and
where did you start? Because again, in this age, so overwhelming, where do I even begin?
I started with 1 yard. So I had an old family friend let me use their whole yard. It was actually a double lot. One of the lots was empty and I had to remediate the soil to use it. I had to bring in all this new soil and do all this. And there was a house in it, and it was being rented to this volunteer group called Katimavik. And they're kind of like, what do you call it? Those non-military people in the U.S. What do you call that?
Non-military people, what do you mean?
Where they go and volunteer and stuff.
Oh, you're talking about like National Guard?
Not National Guard.
Reserves?
No, it's this volunteer program. Anyways, it doesn't matter. It's this program where young people between, I think, 16 and 19 can go in, and they live in a house, they rent a big place, and then they just volunteer all over the community.
Interesting.
So
okay.
There was like 16 kids living in this house when I was urban farming it. And I got to be an influence on all these young kids, and they would help me on the garden. It was really cool. But they were there a year, and then they moved out, and then I moved into the house. So I took it over and I made it my base of operations. And so that's where I started. And then the cool thing that happened with all of that is that I found this sort of truism in life. It's like the old cliche, if you build it, they'll come. I found everywhere that I put a garden and I showed the work physically, people would walk by and they'd be like, this is so cool. And they saw it and they believed, and they're like, well, why don't you come and do my yard? And so I just kind of grew that way, just through osmosis. People would just see it, and then I just expand it that way, and to the point where I had 8 different lots on 2 different acres. One lot itself was like an acre and a half, and then all these other urban lots. And then I had people working for me and all kinds of stuff, but I just put one foot in front of the other, and I didn't really know what I was doing.
So you started with the soil first, though. You brought in soil from elsewhere.
I had to. I spent.
And
some
how
money.
did you know you needed to do that? Though?
Well, because it was builder's rubble. It was just like crappy.
So you literally had to bring
clean
in soil.
fill. I had to bring in soil, and I built up.
How do you go about doing that, though?
I just called different trucking companies, and I said, "Can you bring me loads of soil?"
So you weren't buying soil though from like Home Depot or from Lowe's
I
or
went.
Like
I went and called landscaping companies, and just said I need truckloads, and so I brought in truckloads, and I started that urban farming business on $7,000. I bought a cheap walk-in cooler for $1,000. I bought my first BCS walk-behind tractor for $1,500. Bought a bunch of tools. some grow lights where I could start nursery stuff in a garage, bare minimum infrastructure. I'd make some money, I'd buy some more stuff. And I just kept ratcheting it up, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned that you had a lot of failures. And I think heard you mention this on another show or in a conversation we had before that like 90% of what you did was failures.
So absolutely.
And do you think
10
that
failures are a success at least?
Yeah. Do you think that that's just a part of the process and you have to be okay with that? Or are you, when you talk with other people who are just getting started with their either backyard garden or they want to do an urban farm, you're like, look, you can avoid all these pitfalls and here's how you avoid them?
Yeah. I think you have to be just prepared to accept that you will fail. And if you're not willing to fail forward, you won't last. See, the problem with right now is there's too much content. When I started, there wasn't very much. I had a couple Elliot Coleman books. I had the spin farming book by this guy, Wally Satsowicz in Saskatoon, Canada. And that was it. I was watching, there was a guy named John Kohler on YouTube. I watched a bit, but there wasn't anybody doing urban farming like commercially. And so I didn't really have anything to model. I was just like, well, I'm just going to do it and kind of figure it out. And so, yeah, now it's paralysis through analysis. There's just too much content out there. And so it just makes it so that you're comparing yourself to everybody all the time. And I see that, in the years that followed, I would teach workshops at prestigious universities like Boston University or Ryerson University in Toronto. And I would be talking to all of these grad students that have degrees in agronomy and stuff like that. And here I am, just some punk rock kid who doesn't know anything, who just bootstrapped it. I'm teaching at prestigious universities.
Yeah.
And a lot of, and these students would always say to me, well, I'm just not ready. And I'm like, what do you mean you're not ready? You already have too much education. You just got to do it.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the challenges today is, in a way, you just have to get a foundation of information and then just turn the shit off and just not be afraid to fail, because you will fail. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you still teaching anything on any of your like platforms on how to do urban farming?
Kind of. Yeah. I mean, I made my first online course in 2016. I think I was one of the first people in the whole genre of space to do one. My book came out that year too. That course is now just old and outdated. The Freedom Farmers platform doesn't have an urban farming course, but my book still stands as a textbook for a lot of that stuff.
Okay. We'll put a link to that in the show notes too.
Yeah.
Let's just cover some of the urban farming basics though, again, for someone who's looking to set it up. So obviously, if you have to bring in soil, you got to do that. And then what comes next? You
need the infrastructure. Probably even before you start messing around with soil, it's good to just have an infrastructure. Have a post-harvest area, which is, a sheltered area. In a place like Texas, it really should be cooled because it's so hot here. You got to have your walk-in cooler. You got to have your washing station. You got to have the right hand tools. You got to have the right machinery, transport vehicle. You got to have that stuff. And then start messing around with the land, because the crops actually come quick, especially in warmer growing climates like Florida, Texas, and whatever. So have that stuff before, and then start working the land. And it doesn't take long to get crops in the ground. And so my whole thing was this model of small plot intensive. So it was focused on a 30-inch grow bed in the soil, slightly hilled up, and the bed was a unit of production. So when
you say 30-inch grow bed, what do you mean by that? It's not a raised
wide
bed.
Yeah, it's slightly raised.
Okay, it's just kind of like a raised bed.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it doesn't need to be built with a box. It's just hilled up, and then your walkways are sort of depressed. And then you've got this 30-inch wide so that you can straddle it, you can stand over it, and then you have access in and out very easy because you can cross in and get in and out, move tools in, wheelbarrows, whatever. You'd have like a 1 foot to an 18-inch walkway. And then you'd have a 25 to 50 foot long bed, so that the bed was essentially a unit of production. And I had 3 categories of crops I would call high rotation, bi-rotation, and single rotation. And so a high rotation bed would be a bed that had fast growing crops like a quick growing salad green, a baby root vegetable, things like that could be in and out in 30, 40 days. And then you'd amend the soil and plant something else. And a bi-rotation bed would be 2 crops in a bed in a season, and a single rotation would be just one, like a long-term crop, like an onion or a cabbage or a tomato or something like that. And so the leaner the farm got, the more I just focused on high rotation stuff. And that's when my farm actually became the most profitable, when we would bring in over $100,000 of revenue on a quarter acre. And it got to a point where it was 150,000 because then I started incorporating year-round greenhouses.
Was that net or gross?
Net.
Really?
Yeah, but no. Sorry, gross.
Okay.
It's not money to buy a house.
But still, that's pretty wild.
It's pretty wild.
Like on a quarter, you said on a quarter acre?
Yeah, on a quarter acre.
Incredible.
Yeah, I was personally making $50,000 to $75,000 a year just on my farming.
Yeah,
and that was enough for me to pay another guy part-time or two, a seasonal guy, bring in like an apprentice, have like a full-time guy year-round or almost, and then an apprentice for the main growing season.
How much of that were you keeping for your own sustenance too?
All of
it.
Plenty. Like there's so much abundance that.
So that's my question. You were growing enough to feed yourself primarily, you could say,
absolutely.
And then some more with 1/4 of an acre.
And then I would always have my own personal garden. So it didn't make economic sense for me to grow onions on my farm or potatoes, but I would have that stuff in my own personal 1,000 square foot garden. I had raised beds. I could pop in an image of my original homestead in Kelowna where I had these raised beds and I had perennials and stuff. Unbelievable amount of food production for my family. And then I'd have all the satellite plots for the urban farm. Mm-hmm. And so, very empowering lifestyle of, growing all of my fruit and veggies pretty much year round. Because the thing is too, is like, we were talking a little bit off camera, I think at the beginning about just like how, Texas has a great long growing season. You don't actually need a really long growing season to eat year round from the garden.
What do you mean by that?
Because you can store so many other types of crops. Like I can store my onions in a root cellar or a walk-in cooler. I can store my potatoes. I can have carrots, beets. I can store celery. I can store cabbage. I can store all these things. I can eat fresh veggies all winter long, and I don't need to be harvesting them from the garden in real time.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then I can have, some fresh salad greens in a greenhouse or even on a light fixture in your house. And so there's all these ways to supplement. And it's like, I like 4 seasons like you and I, have that too. Like, so.
That's what I don't like about Texas. Man.
Yeah, I know. It's just too hot. I like having a winter because then I don't have to think about the garden, but I still have stuff fresh.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a cool.
You have a greenhouse though in your current
on my homestead. I have 3 greenhouses.
You have 3. Okay, we'll get to that eventually. But
yeah.
But are you of the mindset that like we're talking about food growing from the lens of being able to provide sustenance for you and your family, especially with like the chaos happening in the world right now? I don't think anything is like imminent in the sense that it's going to flip overnight. I do agree with you. We were talking off camera that it's going to be a slow drip, and I do want to talk about that later on. But I think food security is going to be increasingly an issue going forward, I think. And I think it would behoove of people to grow what they can. And so it's pretty amazing to hear that you're growing on 1/4 of an acre enough to sustain yourself. Primarily, I'm sure you're still going grocery shopping here and there.
Of course. Like I'm still buying coffee and bananas and you know what I mean?
Yeah,
all
stuff
these
like
other
that.
things.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And then even your meat too. Like
For sure.
Like, I know people who have chickens on like an urban homestead type thing. But aside from having chickens or like rabbits or maybe ducks, like you can't have freaking goats or
you can't have
cows.
beef and you can't raise dairy. But you can really do a lot. I mean, even if it's raising meat birds and a few turkeys and then having eggs, there's a lot of protein in just that alone. And so, and then all the other stuff you can do, carbohydrates and all the other types of fiber that you can get from veggies, you can do a lot.
Yeah. Even people who live in an apartment, from my perspective and understanding, there's still a lot that they can do if they truly wanted to grow their own food. Could you talk about that a little bit? Because I know you've experienced growing indoors with lights and stuff like this.
Yeah, there's a lot you can do. I think it's the best way to get your feet wet with growing. Because there's not a lot of commitment. You could spend a few $100s on some infrastructure for inside the home, and then you could just start supplementing your diet. And also, I think all these things are like a stepping stone. So I used to tell people that microgreens are a gateway crop, and so it's like something super easy to do, or sprouting even. Sprouting, then you're doing microgreens, and then you're doing some field crops, and then you're doing greenhouse stuff, and so on and so forth. And so it's more like a gateway to start and experience what fresh things are like in your diet and how empowering that is. Like I remember I didn't know anything. I never grew up with a garden. I was a suburban kid. We didn't grow any of our own food. I went from nothing to being a commercial farmer. And I remember the first time I ate my own lettuce and spinach from the garden, I was completely overwhelmed with emotion in the sense that I had a time-piercing moment. Jesse Elder and I always talk about these moments where you go into this moment where you're in the future, past and present at once. And I remember time-piercing myself into the future, which is where I am now, living on an off-grid homestead that does all the things, or a lot of them. And I was like, in that moment, I felt so empowered because I knew this was the beginning of the journey to establish agency over my life. It was the biggest step I could take with the tools I had at that moment to establish agency and take control. And that was a big moment. And so I think all of these steps are just a step in that direction, whether it's just you've got some inside growing tower. I'm not a fan of the things growing in plastic, but they're a good place to start. Why not, right? Start somewhere. Who cares what it is? Just start. Yeah. Don't be afraid of all the know-it-alls online that are like, oh, well, you should do this and this. Who cares?
Even a few pots with trellises on your balcony.
Absolutely.
If you have an apartment,
to do something to get the taste, to feel the liberation of you produced this thing and nature provided the abundance and then you're there to enjoy it.
Yeah.
That is the vehicle. And then you can start there. And one thing I say to people is if you're in the apartment and you want to really go for it, start with the balcony garden, maybe some inside growing lights, then talk to some other friends that are along the same mindset, and then go get a lease on a piece of land.
Yeah.
And start a community farm.
That's exactly what I was just saying.
And we did that. We did it during COVID. I did it to basically just proof of concept. Yep. Not that I needed to, but I wanted to do it to show people what you could do.
So you started a community garden?
Community farm.
Community farm.
So the difference is the community farm, and this is just my terminology. People get lost in semantics and I don't really care, but my definition of a community farm is that some people come together to pool resources to get a lease on some land or rent some land or whatever. You don't have to own anything. Just get yourself a quarter acre, half acre. We did a half acre and I did the master plan and then everybody just executed on the labor. And so I basically just ran the show and said, we're going to plant this here. We're going to put these greenhouses here because I had the experience. And then I just put together a group. We all pitched in some money to buy seeds and equipment and irrigation infrastructure and greenhouses. And we just made it happen. And it ran for, I think, 4 or 5 years after I left. Mm-hmm. But people move and things like that. But that's the thing that people could do that's way easier than you think.
See, it all goes back to paralysis by analysis,
100%.
man. Like it's so much of that these days.
Yeah. There's too much of it.
There's way too much.
Because people spend too much time online and they're just, then they're just idolizing people. And I see it too. Because like I've traveled the world and I meet people that they've been watching me for 10 years and they think I'm this, that, and the other. And then they meet me and they're just like, he's just a guy.
Yeah, he's just a dude.
I'm just a dude. I just did it and I just kept going. And like, that's the thing. I wasn't the smartest. I wasn't the fastest. I wasn't the strongest, but I was willing to just not stop.
Yeah. I have a lot of empathy though for the mom who's a stay-at-home mom of 3 kids and she can't get her husband on board. I mean, there's so many different unique circumstances for these types of things. But the point is they're seeing all this content and they feel like they have to do it alone, go at it alone. And like, I feel like that's a big psyop as well, that like I have to understand the law completely by myself and be able to do that in an alternative way. I have to homeschool my kids in an alternative way. I also have to grow my garden in an alternative way. Oh, I can't grow enough here to sustain my family. I need to look for land. I don't have enough money to buy land.
Just pick one.
Yeah.
So it's like,
just pick a thing.
That's the thing. Like that's what I'm a horrible multitasker.
Yeah.
And the thing that has helped me in all this is just like pick one thing. So, maybe we'll talk about the law, but I was into that before I was into farming, but I just didn't know how to do anything with it. Now I, have a private practice where I help people and all that, but it's like, I just picked one thing and I started with the gardening and then the farm and then, just went from there. And all the time when I started my urban farm, I just wanted to be an off-grid homesteader. That's all I wanted to do, but it takes a lot of resources and time and skills. I always like to think about the 8 forms of capital, right? And the holistic approach to what do you have? You got money, which is financial capital. You got your relationships, your social capital. You got your family capital. You got your experiential capital. You got your spiritual capital, your cultural capital. you're richer than you think.
Mm-hmm.
The world and the matrix wants you to just only think about it through this one lens of money and finance. But most people actually have a lot more than they think they do.
Yeah.
And when you start to actually do a holistic analysis of what you have in your life and who you're around with, we're all very rich.
Yeah.
And you start to put it all out and you go, oh my goodness, I know this and I know that. And because one thing because I started with no money, $7,000.
Yeah.
But for me, like I read.
So you can confidently say like $7,000 is the initial thing that then grew into what you are now.
For sure.
That's
all
incredible.
I started was $7,000.
Yeah.
And now I'm on, a multi-million-dollar homestead. And I just bootstrapped the entire way.
Yeah.
But it was my belief and in myself and trusting in God and serendipity and synchronicity that I would find a way.
Yep.
And it would present it to me when the time came.
How much did discipline play into that? And how much did trusting the process play into that? And the reason I ask this is because we live in a culture now of fucking instant gratification that is so annoying. And like, I even see it in my kids who we raise differently than all the other families in our neighborhood. But you just see the level of, we order something, we get it the next day or even that evening on Amazon. That's how the world works. And it's like, that's how the world works if you are conditioned into convenience, safety, and security.
Yeah.
That's how the world works. If you want to be at the whims of all these multinational organizations and the government, that's how the world works, right? But that's not how the world works if you want to actually develop self-responsibility and resilience. And I think another big piece of that goes hand in hand with not falling in love with the process and like, what word am I looking for? Like being in love with like putting effort into a thing over the long term that then you can reap the benefits of later on. Right?
Yeah, I mean, it's everything. I mean, and there's two sides to it because one, it's like you'd say, the discipline, and there was less convenience when I started. The one advantage was there was just no scrolling.
Yeah.
There was like social media, I don't even know if Instagram was around. Like there was just no phone scrolling.
Yep.
And so, I'm a kid of the 90s. Like I graduated high school in 1998. The internet wasn't even a thing until I left high school. So I grew up in just like mountain biking and just being a shithead and just, getting in trouble and doing stuff in the real world. And so at the same time though, the convenience is also pretty convenient. I mean, you could start an urban farm today and get a lot of infrastructure on Amazon real quick. Whereas I had to go out and shop around and spend hours or days trying to find the right equipment for things. Now, the content that's out there is good because you can start with a base, but you do need to have discipline. But the nice thing about it is that the discipline feeds itself because once you have a routine for a little while on the discipline, you're thirsting for the discipline.
Well, that's what I mean by that. Like even something simple as, let's say you don't have drip irrigation for whatever reason, like getting up to actually water your plants, like getting up to water your crops that you have, or getting up if you have chickens to make sure the chickens are taken care of. Like that requires discipline and consistency. And I think a lot of people also struggle with that. I mean, even in some respects, because I have so much going on in my life, I sometimes struggle with it lately too, but it's like, it has always brought me to ask myself, well, like, how bad do I want to live the lifestyle that I claim to want?
Yeah.
That's the thing. Like, how bad do I actually want it? Because if I want it that bad, even when I'm fucking tired, I'll do it. Even when I don't feel like doing it, I'll do it. Even if I am having an emotional time or struggling with something, I'll do it if I really want it that bad.
Yep.
And
it doesn't take long for the rewards to show up. I mean, you just start doing it and then you start getting excited about it. And then the list of things to do gets so big that if you don't do it, you're going to be swimming under a bunch of things that are going to make it harder to recover from. So you have to do it. So yeah, it's repetition, like a lot of things, is you just got to get into a routine, and you got to just force yourself to do it. And the hardest step is the first step. Mm-hmm. And every step from there gets easier.
So you think with urban farming, your book that you have is probably the best resource that you know of? Obviously, you're biased, but
I don't know what's been written lately.
Yeah.
I kind of left that space in, I guess it would have been, when did I started in 2009. I kind of left it all in 2018.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but yeah, up until that point, yeah, I mean, I really refined a lot of things because I borrowed from Elliot Coleman and Wally Satsowich and primarily those two guys. And then I met a good brother who's still a good friend of mine today, Jean-Martin Fortier. He was doing market gardening on a larger scale in Quebec. We became real kindred spirits, traveled together. We toured New Zealand and Australia, our books together. And we just workshopped and refined ideas and stuff. But I think, yeah, as far as small farming and just how to do the most on a quarter acre, I gave it all away in my book.
That's awesome.
And that's the one thing that people liked about me. I was just willing to just be totally honest and not hold anything back and just here's the magic sauce. Just go do it.
That's awesome.
You know?
That's awesome. How important are minerals when it comes to how our body actually functions on a day-to-day basis? And how do we even begin approaching mineral sufficiency in the modern world? And are mineral supplements really the best approach to take when it comes to remineralizing? I recently sat down with Caroline Allen, the CEO and co-founder of Beam Minerals, for a conversation about the importance of proper mineralization and the role that humic and fulvic mineral complexes play in supporting overall health. Caroline has spent years studying minerals in human health and how modern food production, agricultural practices, and lifestyle factors have influenced mineral intake over time. Beam Minerals was created to provide a concentrated source of plant-based humic and fulvic mineral complexes designed to support the body's natural functions. I'd love for you to hear from Caroline so she can share about Beam Minerals and why humic and fulvic mineral complexes are so vitally important for our health. Here's a clip from that episode.
The ratio of minerals that you need in your cells is the same as the ratio that are needed in a tree, in a little plant, in a cow. At a cellular level, we all work the same. I met my business partner, Dan Howard, and he introduced me to these plant-based minerals. We need to bring these humic and fulvic molecules to the world because this is how we reconnect humanity with Earth. When they're in your body, they enhance so many things. They're meant to be in your body.
So if you're interested in checking out Beam Minerals, just head over to beamminerals.com and use code TWF20 at checkout for 20% off your order, or just head to the show notes. And if you'd like to go a little bit deeper on Beam Minerals, humic and fulvic mineral complexes and the importance that they play in our health and all the things related to that, check out episode 246 of the Way Forward podcast, where I had the chance to sit down with Caroline. Does your book apply to people, whether they're in Austin, Texas or Montreal, Canada?
Any climate.
Any climate.
Any
Okay.
climate. Yeah.
So you cover the different climate types and like how,
yeah,
what to
because
consider.
it's really about principles.
Yeah.
You know, I would say the places that it probably, you really have to, well, you just modify it, but the tropics are where everything gets very different.
Yeah.
Or Arctic climates on the extreme ends of the climate.
Would you say in some respects when it comes to fruit, tropics are actually easier to grow things though?
Fruit, yeah.
Yeah, fruit.
Yeah, I mean, when you're in the tropics, it's hard to do annual vegetables.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you're in the tropics, it's fish and fruit, right? Then
I'd be cool with
I
that.
love that.
Dude,
Yeah.
I would be totally
I love
fine.
that, you know. But the thing with the mindset, because I've been doing some work in the tropics recently and preparing to do a project down there, and it's like the mindset is so different in the tropics, which is really interesting. You get a guy like me who is like, I'm a white Anglo-Saxon. I come from generations of farmers. Our mindset, if you read, say, a book like Guns, Germs, and Steel, or talking about like what made the sort of Protestant work ethic so crazy is because we had a winter.
Mm-hmm.
Because we had to hustle so hard for 6 months to create enough surplus to get you through
I've never thought of it
the
like
winter.
That makes a lot of sense.
You go to the tropics, everything is mañana.
Yeah.
Because there's fruit on the tree all year.
That's such a good point.
So you don't have to do
I've never thought
the
of it like that.
same thing that the white Western work ethic brings.
Yeah.
And it's really, you take it for granted because even here in Texas, you know, the native Texan, you know, excluding sort of the indigenous Mexican culture that was here prior, but the native Texan, the white cowboy, still comes from that long lineage of European farmers that had to work their ass off all summer to create a surplus for the winter. And that's the thing, like we take for granted where our work ethic comes from, and it's that.
I mean, I've never thought of it.
We're
like
farmers
that.
in our
Interesting.
blood. If you're a European,
it really
you're
is.
Serbian.
Yeah, I'm Serbian.
It's all in your blood.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It can be a blessing and a curse sometimes because you can
for sure.
overwork yourself too. But I've never thought of that because like they always say island time. They like make it a joke where it's like everything's late, everything's running late, you're on island time. But again, when you don't have to really work that hard because there's an abundance of nature around you that's providing sustenance for you, it's like
Central Americans can't understand. I mean, many do.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, they cannot understand that this needs to be done tomorrow.
Yeah. That's interesting. But I can see where it can be a blessing and a curse for people like us, though, too, of that heritage, because it's like we tend to overwork ourselves even in situations when we don't have to. We have that. I'll speak for myself. There's also elements of like working to prove my worth type of thing that can be incredibly unhealthy.
Yeah.
But there's also just like this innate desire to work because the fear of like what happens if I don't work. I think that's where it can get pretty unhealthy rather than just working, that mindset of working because this will provide for me down the road if I do the work for it now.
For sure. At the same time, yeah, okay, it's all...
You see what I'm saying? It depends on the
there's
intention
costs and benefits and there's trade-offs, right? And so I think I wouldn't replace that, especially with where we're going in the world.
Yeah.
I would never get rid of that hustle.
Yeah,
I would never let my
point.
guard down on that hustle. I think for all of its negative connotations or things that might trickle into your relationships or your mindset, that sort of fear of scarcity in a way is the foundation of the hustle.
That makes sense. That totally makes sense. So what was the impetus for you to finally leave the urban farming lifestyle and move on to a homestead? You mentioned that you kind of always had in your mind that you would eventually get there. And it's interesting because this goes back to the instant gratification thing. You had this long-term vision and you were willing to put in the work on a day-to-day basis to eventually get there, starting with $7,000, doing an urban homestead, if you will, like urban farming with sometimes a fourth of an acre, sometimes 2 acres, sometimes another fourth of an acre, proof of concept and doing a community garden. You showed that in an urban environment, you can absolutely grow food to sustain yourself and your community if you're willing to put in the work. And then if the people around you are willing to put in the work too, great. Then even more abundance for everyone else. And then you had this vision in mind to move out, get away from the city and go on to a homestead. Was that because of your desire to farm and live that lifestyle? Or was it because of what you saw coming in the world? Or was it a mix of both?
It was a mix of both. It was during COVID. You know, I'd had my daughter. My daughter was born in 2017 and my late wife, Katie, and my daughter. And we just had our son born late October 2019. The whole COVID show really starts rolling in like February, March of 2020. I saw my neighborhood turn into, I had all this social capital, you know, abundant gardens. All my neighbors know me. I had this policy where it's like, if you can reach it, you can eat it.
Oh,
so,
that's
you
cool.
know, come by. I had my place fenced just for privacy and safety of my kids living in a when we say urban, I'm not talking downtown Austin, right? We're talking like suburban, similar to where we are
but
here.
But you still could grow food in downtown Austin if you have like...
If you have the land, you can grow anywhere.
Like even an eighth of an acre.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. But, you know, so I had this like policy, if you can reach it, you can eat it. People come by, knew all my neighbors. Everybody knew my kids. And then the whole COVID show started. All my social capital, because I couldn't shut up because I was a truther for so long that when all this...
You were raised that way, dude.
Like I just started, I couldn't shut up. So my social capital in the urban farming world dried up real quick.
Wow.
Because I kind of came out as this conspiracy theorist, right-wing, neo-Nazi, all the epithets they throw at you. My neighbors are now shutting their blinds, peeking out the windows to make sure my kids are wearing masks. They never did. We never did. We never complied with any of it. But I saw my world all of a sudden really shut in. And I the time was a blessing and a curse. And it was a blessing in the sense that your best relationships flourished and turned into all kinds of things you couldn't have imagined. But all your acquaintances, gone.
Yeah.
And so that was the main motivation. It was like, finally, we need to do this. I had built the experience, the money, and the confidence to actually execute. And so my whole urban farming journey in a way was a blessing that I bootstrapped it, not doing what I wanted to do, but I knew it was a bridge to get there. Mm-hmm. And so that's when we just said, fuck it, let's just do it. I spent 6 months looking for land.
What did that process look like?
Oh man, it was a grind. It's
Did
so
you have
much
any
easier
experience
now.
looking for land?
I
at this
did
point?
because I had been on the back end, beginning of my farming career, I had been consulting.
Got it.
I've been a consultant for my entire farming career. And so the beautiful thing about being a consultant, I'm still a consultant today that consults on many other things, mostly about freedom, whether that's the law or farming or homesteading or off-grid living, whatever it is, prepping, is that when you're consulting, you're getting a massive download of people's problems every day.
Yeah.
And you're solving people's problems every day. And so by the time I was ready to buy the land, do the whole thing, I felt absolutely ready. And it was a serendipitous time in a way. But I spent 6 months driving all across British Columbia. For people who know BC, I was essentially looking from, say, Kelowna as a center point, as far north as Revelstoke, about 2 hours north of Kelowna, as far south as Osoyoos, as far west as Princeton, and as far east as Cranbrook. And I'm just driving around. I would go on weekend trips. I'd bring the kids and my wife, and we would just go and view land. I'd get the drone up in the air. And so I'd done a lot of it because I had in my mind, over consulting for so many years, built up this matrix on what makes a property homesteadable.
Can you share a little bit about that?
Absolutely.
I'm sure so many people are interested at this point in time, if they have the means to, looking into buying land if they haven't already.
Is crazy. The way I do it is, it's kind of this like, and I have a course that shows people how to do this.
Yeah.
And I'm going to give your members a free month to my program. They can watch this course. They're going to have access to my land finding program, which my team vet land. And it's easier than ever to find land because we do it for you.
That's epic. That'll all be in the show notes for those who are watching.
That's all in the show notes. But it's like so I had to just grind it out. But I was building up this framework in my mind. And basically it's like, the first thing is, what's your context? Where do you want to live? What does homesteading look like for you? What do you and your spouse agree on? Or your community, whoever it is that your partners are on this, like, vision that out. Like, what does a morning look like? What are you doing? What do you want to grow? How do you want to live? What's the climate you want to live in? Like, where do you want to live? If you grew up in, Pennsylvania, and now you want to move to Northeast Texas, totally different environment, right? So,
dude, I would even say from growing up primarily in Kansas City, which isn't that far to here, completely different, bro.
And so that's the fascinating thing about the United States, is how different it is. Yeah. Canada's similar too.
Even parts of Texas relative to other parts of Texas. Texas is huge though. It's different.
Texas is huge, and it's so different. There's so many different climates in Texas alone, with elevation and the arid climate to temperate and so on and so forth. But so it's understanding your context. Then it's like visioning out, what are your negotiables and non-negotiables? So what are things that you absolutely must have and things you absolutely can't have? And what are things that you're okay with? And you're okay if you got this thing and it's not perfect, but it's okay. You're willing to be flexible on that. And then going down to looking for threats. What's a threat? What's a threat on the property? What's a threat on the neighbor's property? Zoom out to the 60-mile view. What's a threat in the general region? That could be some industry close to an airport, close to some like Tyson chicken factory that smells
data
like hell.
Center.
Data center now.
Have you seen that farmers are reporting that where data centers are near their farm, that they haven't had any cattle births? And
yeah. There's all these low frequency vibrations, and it's insane how toxic it all is. So those are your threats, right? And then once you move, so the idea when you're looking for property is to build a list, use a spreadsheet, just put in what you're like 50 properties you want to go deeper on. The first thing, do they fit your context? Are there any negotiables and non-negotiables in there? And then immediately try to eliminate based on identifying threats, because you want to just disqualify quickly so that you're not spending time visiting, because the visit is what takes the most amount of time. You got to get in your car, pack up your kids and go, right?
Especially if you're doing it with a realtor too.
Once you have the realtor, it's even more of a can of worms. But so once you go through all of that, then you go into the 11 Scales of Permanence, which is this tool on how to understand the material world with all the variables that make property what it is. And so the first And the ideas of the layers of the scales of permanence is that it goes from hardest to change to easiest to change.
Got it.
So when you're hardest to change, number one is climate. The climate you get is what you get. There's not much you can do to change the climate. Yeah, you can get some greenhouses and all that, but
it's pretty wild though when people have like huge swaths of land that were deserted and then they are able to like plant things like the Los Plateau that was covered on Kiss the Ground.
Yeah.
It's wild how microclimates can be created, but that's a completely separate context.
Yes, but so hardest to change, yes, you can change it with resources.
That's what I meant.
Okay,
dude.
so
I'm not talking about like some dude with a 10-acre property. I'm talking like thousands and thousands of acres that they regenerate over the course of 20 years. But all that to say, it is still pretty wild when you bring nature back. It literally does change the climate.
If you got time and resources, the world is your oyster.
Yeah.
But most people don't have that when they're starting out.
Like I'll say this, Molly, just real quick as a quick aside. It was so interesting in her farm that she used to have in Fillmore, California.
Yep.
I don't know what the exact climate type was in Fillmore. I just know that there was like mountains and hills in the distance and they were all pretty brown and didn't really have a lot of greenery on them. And Molly's property literally looked like not a jungle oasis, but just like this lush green oasis in the middle of all that. And so it seemed like she had created some sort of 60-acre microclimate relative to the rest of what was going on.
Yeah.
And I don't know that for sure. I don't know shit about that. But
I know the farm. I know Molly. I'm watching what she's doing in Bandera. Yeah, the tools are there. The techniques are there. She's using grazing animals to help regenerate the landscape, silvopasture, all these kinds of great things. But so going back to 11 scales of permanence, climate, hardest to change. So pick the climate you like. Yeah. You know, look for what's average wind speed. Because wind speed is a thing that Kansas City, forget about it.
Yeah.
Oklahoma, forget about it.
I would say the flat parts of Kansas City. There also is hilly parts of Kansas City.
There are parts,
too.
yeah.
Kansas City, Missouri versus Kansas City, Kansas.
Yeah, right, exactly. And so, but pick the climate you know and that you like and you want to be in and you have some experience in it. Then you go into land form. What's the topography of the land? What's there? You know, then you go into water. What's the water? Are there multiple sources of water? Is there one? I tell people have two sources of water.
Okay.
That could be rainwater collection and a well. That could be municipal water and rainwater collection. Whatever the mix is, it's always good to have at least two sources of water. Then you go into socioeconomics. So what are the governance of the land? What are the boundaries of the land? What are the crime rates near the town that you're living in? Mm-hmm. And then down the line to access and circulation, zones of use, all these things, all the way at the bottom to aesthetics, easiest to change. And so that's the lens in which I look at it and how I find land. And yeah, it's a process. But once you start understanding the fundamentals of it and really understanding what you want, the foundation of what it is what you want and how you envision your life. And how you want to live on a homestead. Because you might want to say, I want to live in the tropics and I want to do ponds with tilapia and I want tropical fruit and maybe some annual vegetables. But that's how I want. Or I want to live on a farm like Molly's and I want to have pastured animals and I want to have fruit trees and whatever it is, field crops. And there's all kinds of things you can do. But like, what is it? I would say, don't try to do it all.
Yeah.
Start with a couple things and start small.
What are the easiest things to start with in general? This is a very general question.
Annual vegetables, probably the easy. I mean, indoor growing is the easiest thing to start with. You can just like plant some stuff inside and watch it grow and have a fast turnover and get to experience what the life cycle of a plant is. Mm. And then you start getting into the life cycle of an animal and all of that. And so, or life cycle of a fruit tree that takes 3 years to bear fruit. So yeah, just start with something and don't try to do it all at once because then you'll burn out.
Yeah.
And every homesteader is going to hit burnout at some point, but yeah, finding finding land is the most important part because if you make that wrong move, you took out a mortgage or whatever it was to make that happen. And then you find in a year into, this is the wrong place. I can't believe we did it. Now you got a whole other world of problems.
That's why I'm kind of a little bit happy that we haven't bought land in Texas because this is a conversation I'll have to have with my wife. And I already have had a little bit, but I need to be more serious about it. Like, I don't know that this is where I want to live, dude. Yeah. It's months like this when the heat is like this that I find myself saying this. But then when like September, October comes around or it's springtime here, I'm like, man, I love it here. It's great.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I come down in January and I'm like, this is sweet.
This is sick. But right now, man, I just cannot stand it.
Yeah.
So, in your opinion, when it comes to buying land, in terms of your ability to kind of do it all, right? Both graze animals if you want to, even if that comes to cows, but also grow an abundance of fruits and vegetables, ideally both. What are the most lush spots in the United States to purchase land? Like if you could choose anywhere in the United States, if you're someone who's looking, you have the money to do it, where would you buy land right now?
Are we factoring in price?
Let's do one with price, without price.
Well, I mean,
I'm going to imagine Hawaii is going to be one of them.
Well, yeah and no. The tropics aren't as easy to exist in as people think they are, because in the tropics, disease and pests don't go away.
Got it.
And so that actually creates a litany of problems. If you're willing to completely adapt your diet to what natively makes most sense, then you can live anywhere.
Yeah. Which I think is biologically appropriate.
I think it's biologically appropriate too. I think our bodies actually would adapt. Humans are incredibly perseverant and adaptable. And I think there's so much to that.
I also mean like eating what is native to that area.
Absolutely.
I think is biologically appropriate.
And I like that.
Yep.
I would say in the US, I like North Central Arkansas, Ozarks.
Yeah.
I really like the Ozarks. Arkansas is cheaper than Missouri. It's a little bit less trendy. I like that climate. Yeah, it's hot and muggy in the summer, but the other 10 months of the year are quite lovely. Yeah. I like the green. I love the lakes everywhere. I like Northeast Texas. It's similar, just without the Ozarks, lower elevation. I really like Idaho. I like the northern part of Idaho close to Canada. I like that same sort of portion of western Montana is quite nice.
What about like Wisconsin, Minnesota? No? Really?
No, don't like Wisconsin, Minnesota. It's too damn cold.
Okay.
I mean, I drove through those states this April.
It's beautiful in the summer though, man.
It is beautiful in the summer, but it's buggy too. So much snow in April. I drove through Wisconsin and Minnesota. I couldn't believe how much snow there was. I'm not a fan, but it depends what you like. Like if you like the four seasons, there's some gems in northern Michigan, off the Mitten and above Lake Michigan, some real gem properties and good mindset of people in general too, like real sort of salt of the earth, good old farm boys and stuff. Yeah, it just depends what you like. I don't like Florida. I don't like Georgia and Louisiana. It's too hot and humid. I don't like the socioeconomics. It's too many people. Like Florida is probably one of my favorite places to visit for a short period of time in the winter, but there's just too many damn people.
Yeah, that's fair.
There's just not enough space. I like space. That's why I live where I do. I live on a mountaintop and there's the population density is so low. I like the space. I like to walk around in the morning and nobody's watching me, I like that. And there are many parts of the United States that are like that. The problem with the United States in general, when you look at it, is that you've got sort of east of the Mississippi that's where the majority of the population live. Why? Well, it's the first place that was settled, but it's also really green.
Yeah, it is.
And then you have the Great Divide. And you've got Kansas and Nebraska and North Dakota and South Dakota and most of Wyoming and Montana, not good. The arid climates into the high elevations of Utah and New Mexico, Western Texas, barren.
Yep.
But then west of the Cascades, lovely. The breadbasket of America is the Central Valley of California. Why? Because it's dry enough that it's not a problem, but it's wet enough and temperate enough that you can pretty much grow everything year round.
It is wild when you learn how much of our food comes from California.
I think 80%
Dude,
from vegetables and fruits.
Insane.
It's insane. Central Valley, California is unbelievable.
Yeah.
And it's easy to see why. So I would say those, Northern California, even right now, there's some good value in Northern California. Beautiful climate. I like that. I used to really like Northeast Washington. I used to tell people a lot to go there, but I've become friends with the border guys there. When I'd come to the U.S., I'd drive to Spokane and fly from Spokane. And so,
why do you do it that way?
Because I prefer to cross. I prefer to deal with border CBS. Is it border service, whatever they're called, on land than in the airport.
Okay.
They screw me around less, and I really got to know the guys. They stop me every time, not because they want to screw me around because they want to talk about homesteading.
Oh, for real?
So I really got to know
cool.
I really got to know these guys, and they're all truthers, and they're actually quite cool. These like small area rural border crossings. And so I find it easier. I used to like fly through Seattle and go through the border there, and it was always a nightmare. And then you might miss a flight. So I come in the night before, stay in a hotel, and then I can catch an early morning flight. It works out well. Cool. But yeah, no, I would say those places. But Northeast Washington, all these guys that I know there, they're all leaving.
Why is that?
Because Seattle, or is it Olympia? That's the capital of Washington.
I think Olympia is the capital.
Olympia's capital. They're making it so difficult to hunt and fish there.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and it sucks because that
was
through
licensing and stuff.
Like
tags.
Yeah, the border guys this time around were telling me that they reduce the general pool of tags if a deer gets hit on the road by a car.
Dude.
It's just like so lame.
Yeah.
And there's no real remedy for that except for just doing it illegally and stuff.
Having your own land and just being quiet about it.
Exactly. And so, I just think it's no longer that great. But you go to Idaho and it's amazing, but Idaho's expensive. The best part of Idaho is the part that's closest to Canada. The green part, it's the tip. Like that
the
small
Moscow,
sliver.
Sandpoint.
Except the Sandpoint.
Whiteface area.
That's right. Yep. Whereas like southern Idaho is just like the dry plains where all the precipitation that comes in from the west coast, because it all comes through those prevailing winds, hits the Rocky Mountains, and it just drizzles down, and there's no water.
Yeah,
and so it sucks.
I used to live right near the Snake River too, so I lived in two different spots in Idaho: Moscow, Idaho, and then Twin Falls, Idaho. So I've seen both.
Yeah,
I don't remember a lot of it because I was younger, but I do remember like Moscow, lush green, a little bit wet climate, kind of rainy, kind of like Washington State, but then. It almost seemed like, I won't say Arizona, but almost like Utah.
It is.
In southern Idaho, and in terms of like it being dry, more desert, like not fully desert, but drier like that. So.
Yeah, those are called steppe climates or semi-arid climates, high elevation, cold deserts.
Yeah.
And then the further south you get into the hot desert, and then it's really difficult to live in some of those places, and low elevations in New Mexico and Arizona are, like I tell people sometimes, Phoenix, Arizona is one of the worst places in the world to be if the shit hits the fan.
Really?
Because there's an aquifer.
It's interesting though, because on the flip side, Arizona tends to be pretty freedom oriented overall.
Yeah, but there's also a lot of, urban degeneracy that if there was no infrastructure to pump water, you will die in Phoenix.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's just like, the way I used to think about it is in terms of prepping is imagine if everybody wants to leave a metropolitan area at once, what happens? Nobody's going anywhere.
Yep.
It's like every zombie apocalypse movie you've ever seen where the highways are just blocked, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the problem with these hot climates is that there's no water. And that's the thing that you can't go with the longest.
Yep.
Right? You can go without food for a long time. You can fast and whatnot, but
I think in a survival context, it's 3 months without community, 3 weeks without food, 3 days without water, and then 3 minutes without breath.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's so hot in Phoenix. Could you imagine just being gridlocked there trying to get out?
Dude,
it's so hot, it's hard to breathe.
Yeah.
There's no water. Everybody wants it. And so it's one of the worst places in the world to live, in my opinion, if you're thinking along that lines. And so, yeah. But there's a lot of good places in the United States. But I think the way I like to think about it, which this is just my context, is like people are your greatest asset, but also your greatest liability.
What do you mean by that?
In that, okay, here in Austin, Texas, we're broing down last night, hanging with all these good friends, and it's just like community, right? Greatest asset. But then you think about the level of political discontent and division that's in the world today, and what happens in a scenario where it's 3 days without food and there's a lot of people who don't like each other.
Yeah, man.
Forget how close you are to a farm. If the population has a tank of gas and some guns, you don't really want to be near a population center.
Yeah.
Because your farm is not really going to last.
Jesse
if
and
it's
I
visible by the highway,
yep.
Forget about it.
Jesse and I talked about that on a podcast we did, like, in a true shit hit the fan survival situation, even if it's temporary, like even if it's the grid goes down for 24 hours, like people can't even conceive of. I can't even conceive of the supply chain disruptions that would cause, and then being in a city center or near a city center, and people go hungry for 24, 48, 72 hours.
Dude, I saw it. I was living in Montreal in 2008, and I lived through a freezing rainstorm that essentially, and this wasn't even the worst one, but it knocked out, was it late 2000 or early 2000, late 2007, early 2008, I forget what it was exactly, but there was this freezing rainstorm that knocked out so much infrastructure. Freezing rain is insane. And so, on a flip side, Phoenix, Arizona, hot climate requires insane amounts of government and corporate infrastructure just to feed you and bring you water. Montreal, on the opposite end, so cold and deadly in the winter that you can get a freezing rainstorm that comes in and covers everything with 2 inches of ice. My door was frozen shut. I couldn't get out of my home. I couldn't open the windows because I had the screen door on the front that opened up. I had to break to get out. I walked down the street after this all-night freezing rainstorm. People are falling, cars are crashing, fire hydrants are blowing out. Go to the grocery store, there's barely any food. That was actually my major wake-up call to be like, how fragile our civilization is.
Yeah, man.
That was my biggest wake-up call to be like, I don't want to live this way anymore.
And it's only gotten worse.
And you have no agency because it's like, you come home, you turn on the power, you hope that it turns on. You flush the toilet, you hope that it flushes. You turn on the taps, you hope you walk to the grocery store, you hope there's food there. You have zero agency over the things that you need to live right now.
Dude, it's so interesting you say this. This is very timely. Reese, remember I had to push back the podcast episode the other day because in our neighborhood, they turned off the water for a little bit for our whole neighborhood because they were doing constructions on the water line coming from the city. And just not having water for 3 hours, I've thought about these things, of course, right? I've had conversations about this. Kylie and I have prepared and are continuing to prepare even more, not from a black pill doomer type, mindset, but more of a common sense preparedness given the context of where we live in the state of the world. And we can get to that in a little bit. But just having the water shut off for 3 hours, your mind's like, oh shit, I can't do that right now. Oh shit, I can't do that right now. Oh, I can't do that right now.
Yeah.
You don't even think of the things until it happens. And it's like, oh dang, what would happen if this happens for 96 hours? What if it happens for a week? What if it happens for a month? What would I do? And what would I do relative to what everyone else around me is doing?
Yeah.
Because there's levels of understanding and preparedness.
Absolutely.
Where there's people who are already prepped. They have rainwater catchment systems already in place. But then there's people who haven't thought a day about this, haven't thought a minute about this. The water shuts off for 24, 48, 72, 96 hours. What the hell are they going to do?
I know.
How desperate are they going to get? And those thoughts started swimming in my head. I'm like, damn, man, this could get crazy really fast. It is.
And that's where, when you go down that rabbit hole, not to play on the fear, but it's like, don't fear the fear, just address it,
Yep.
But it's like, but then you think about what people know you have.
Yes.
And that's where, again, people can be your greatest liability.
Even just like you said, even farmers that are near the highway or farmers that are established farm that they have CSA boxes and they have raw milk stand right outside.
Unless you have a militia protecting your farm, there's no way. And that's why I live in the mountains in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Because I've thought these things through forever.
So talk to me about your process of both purchasing your land and also the process of developing a homestead on it. Because what's really cool is you've done a pretty good job, from my understanding, of sort of documenting your process and how you've done it. And you've, again, not only showed it in an urban farming context, proof of concept that it can work there, you can provide sustenance for yourself there. How much different the world would be if we didn't rely on these massive supply chains and people just even took 5%, 10%, 50% steps towards growing their own food. If the supply chain shut down, that would be less of a concern because we have an abundance of food and resources. We've come together as a community to start community gardens in all these places. And that's just the world that I hope for. And I hope conversations like this can inspire people to do things like that. But so you've shown proof of concept there, and you've also shown it with developing a homestead, because it's not like, of course, homesteading has its challenges all the time, I'd imagine. And with that being said, you're crushing it. It's not, you're not living, how do I put this? You're not in a shanty shack that is falling apart and barely have power. And like,
it's a pretty bougie homestead.
Yeah, it's a bougie off-grid homestead, right?
Yeah.
Like, and it's you're fully off-grid.
Fully off-grid, yeah.
That's incredible.
And by that, I mean, okay, so the process. So, I mean, clarity of terms. What I mean by off-grid in my context doesn't mean that I'm cut off from the world. I have Starlink and
but off-grid, I mean in like I'm fully self-sustainable.
Yeah, so food, water, energy, and shelter. So food, multiple food systems, annual gardens in 3 different greenhouses, food forests, perennial systems, chickens for meat, egg layers, turkey. I don't do all the animals. There's more kind of coming into the fold, maybe some goats and things like. I don't try to do everything at once. I'm past that. Water, multiple sources of water. So a drilled well that is optimal. If I have 4 kilowatts to pull that water, it's the best water from the mountain, uncontaminatable, unbelievable, hard, beautiful mineral water. Or I got snow melt on natural riparian areas on my farm that capture into 2 different ponds. Or I've got rainwater catchment on all of my roofs that all accumulate into one area where I've got these underground cisterns. So I can have multiple sources. So 3 sources of water, really. And I have sort of a 4th where I've got this pit well thing that was part of the original infrastructure on on the homestead that I can pump water out of a culvert into a cistern. And then I can pump my water up to these cisterns at 100 feet higher up the mountain that gravity feed into my whole system, all the gardens. So that's all automated and just timers come on. So food, water.
Drip irrigation?
Yeah, I got drip. I got overhead. I like to have multiple systems.
Okay.
It's all about redundancies when you're off grid. You have to have multiple things for everything. So with power, mostly solar, 20 kilowatts of solar. That's 48 panels on 3 different rigs that are all south to southeast to southwest. And then a diesel generator backup.
Okay.
That has the ability to, if all the technology failed and there was an EMP, I could basically pull a switch and just go straight to AC and just power everything off the generator.
Have you looked into getting wood burning generators backup?
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially where you live.
Absolutely. Gasification. Yeah. I have a wood boiler that has a gasifier built into it that I could repurpose that gasification to power a generator. Totally. I'm already on that. And then shelter. And so with shelter, I would include heat into that. So you need to have a place to live that's sheltered and comfortable, but you need to have multiple ways to heat. So on my homestead, when I've got lots of electricity, sunny part of the winter, from January till February, I can actually run a heat pump. I've got enough solar coming in that I don't have to stoke a wood fire. I can just heat with electricity because I've got lots of solar. I can heat with electricity. I can heat water with electricity. So I can heat a domestic hot water tank if I've got enough solar, for 10 months of the year. That's mostly what I use because it's easy and convenient. I can heat my home with propane gas in a central dual fuel furnace system that can run electricity to heat or cooling. And then I can use propane for that. I can heat water with propane on a hot water demand system. I can heat with wood with a couple different ways, 3 different ways in a way. So one, I've got a central wood boiler that if times are good and because I have a guest house, I have a passive solar greenhouse that's heated, it's active, passive, whatever. I can run one fire and heat all the infrastructure on the homestead, or I can reduce it down to one stove one cook stove in my kitchen. In my kitchen, I have 3 stoves. I got a wood cook stove, an electric stove, and a gas stove. And so with that one stove, if the shit were to hit the fan tomorrow, no electricity, I can't even pump water. With one stove, I can heat my home. I live in a super efficient home with German engineered triple gasketed windows, R80 insulation in the ceiling, R40 walls upstairs, R60 walls downstairs, and it's bermed into the earth. So it's facing the south, maximum sunlight coming in. But with one stove, I can heat the home, I can cook on it, and I can heat my domestic hot water.
Wow.
With one stove, without electricity. And if say it were all go to shit tomorrow and I couldn't even pump my well, I can go down into my utility room and I have a manual crank pump that can pump water from my snow melt rain and rainwater catchment into my 8,000 liters of cisterns. I can crank a pump and manually fill up my pressure tank and then run a shower for 5 minutes.
So you weren't homesteading before this. You were in an urban context.
Yeah.
What was the learning curve like with that?
It was a lot, even though I knew a lot, because I knew a lot about water and irrigation and farming and building greenhouses, but I didn't know a lot about managing construction, managing trades, running heavy equipment. I self-taught on my excavator and skid steer. I'd done all my own heavy equipment work. I didn't know I just had to bootstrap it, but I was comfortable with that because I was like, I had a golden time from basically the time that we moved onto that property. My wife and my kids, we were all aligned. This is what we're doing. My wife was unbelievably supportive. I had a lot of passive income coming from one of my US companies at the time. I just had this like horseshoe up my rear end where I was like, I'm just going to do this. Mm-hmm. And that's all I did for pretty much 4 years.
When you're looking at the type of food you're growing or the animals you're raising, how much are you thinking about a quote unquote apocalyptic scenario and the caloric density of what you're growing?
A lot. I'm always building soil.
Okay.
I'm always increasing biodiversity. I'm greening my property constantly, though it's really dry. Like the boreal forest that we live in is, all of our precipitation is in the winter. It all comes in snow, and then it barely rains for the other 8 months of the year. Yeah. So we really have to hold on to water and increase foliage on the property to hold on to water, hold on to soil, and all of that. So yeah, it's a big part of it. Am I out there measuring it? No, but I trust my intuition, and I'm a self-taught bootstrap guy, and I've never been one to get too scientific about things, though I appreciate that science, and I listen to people who follow it, and I take tips from them, but I just pretty much follow my gut with how to build soil and biodiversity.
Okay. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. If you listen to this show, you are probably well aware that there's something seriously off with our modern food systems. And even a lot of food labeled organic isn't what it seems. Some of it's shipped in from China where regulations are murky at best, and other times companies slap the USDA organic label on while cutting corners and doing the absolute bare minimum in order to achieve that label. That's why Dr. Cowan's Garden exists. Founded by Dr. Tom Cowan, they believe health starts with food, real food, the way that it's supposed to be grown. They call their sourcing beyond organic, which means they're working with small family-run farms who are going above and beyond the USDA organic label when it comes to growing their food. These farms care deeply about soil health and nutrient density, and some are even biodynamic certified, the highest farming standard in the world. At Dr. Cowan's Garden, they use proper processing techniques that humans have used for thousands of years because they actually work. Nuts and grains are soaked or sprouted just as traditional cultures did. Olive oils and apple cider vinegars are never heated, preserving fragile nutrients. Olive oil is protected from light because oxidation matters. The list goes on and on. The products at Dr. Cowan's Garden are made to be deeply nourishing and also incredibly delicious. Foods that you actually enjoy eating and foods that make healthy decisions actually feel good. Dr. Cowan's Garden is not about fads, it's not about fear, and it's definitely not about following government health recommendations. It's about reclaiming a simple trust in your food. If you value transparency, tradition, and food that respects both your body and nature, head to drcowansgarden.com or just head to the show notes and use code THEWAYFORWARD for 15% off your first order. Welcome back to Real Nourishment. So if you could just talk to me in a little bit more detail about what went into developing the homestead, like really starting from the ground, like raw piece of property. I think you had a cabin on it. Did you already have a well on it, or is that something that you
I had to
drilled?
do it. Okay. Had to drill it. Yeah.
Okay, but just talk to me about that whole process, because that's cool. That's cool hearing that, because aside from the cabin that was on it, there wasn't a lot of infrastructure, and you had to develop that over the course of now 5.5 years.
Yeah.
Which is also amazing. And yes, you had the capital and the passive income to be able to do it, but that nonetheless, you showed that you can take a raw piece of property from nothing and have a fully operational, fully self-sufficient homestead within just a few years.
Yeah.
And it's like, again, people get overwhelmed by seeing the finished product.
Yeah.
And that's where they're just like, screw it, I'm not even going to start. I don't even know how to get there. And I think because you're a generator and because you had done it before with urban farming and things like that, you're like, we're just going to do it. We're going to make it happen. This is the lifestyle that I want to live. We're going to make it work.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, we bought this place. It had this little cabin on it. It had a tiny little off-grid system with a 1 kilowatt solar. It had a crappy gas generator, a Honda generator, these 2 400-watt wind turbines. And that was it. The only water infrastructure was this watershed that had this culvert in a little inflection point where the snow melts, and the guy put gravel in there and put a culvert in so that the ground would kind of fill up with water, and then he'd pump that water with a gas-powered pump into this concrete cistern. That's all that was there. Very minimal composting toilet, very, very stripped down. So we started with that. When we first bought this place, we hadn't sold our house in Kelowna yet. I bought this place September 2020. And then it took us a year to get ready to sell the house and then list it and go through all that. We didn't sell the house till September 21. So
you didn't even really start developing it that much till...
No, I did. I started developing it April of 2021.
Okay, that's interesting though, because it wasn't 2020. That's still like now a year.
We were just using it as a cool Airbnb for the fall and
with
winter.
With the cabin and everything.
Yeah, we'd go up for a week and just have a lovely time and just enjoy nature, go on hikes and
cross-country ski, I bet.
Cross-country ski. I had 20 bear incidents. 20 bear incidents, smashing everything you can imagine. The wild is wild, man.
Oh, I bet.
This is the difference
Canada.
between living in farm country and living in a mountaintop rural homestead. You know, the type of property that I bought is what's called a recreational property.
Okay.
It's not typically what people buy to homestead.
Interesting.
I had to build a big fence. So the first thing I did when I bought that place is I needed a shop so that I could do stuff out of the weather. And so I could keep working on things throughout the winter. So I built this shop as a steel Quonset hut, put down a concrete pad, put this Quonset over top by the cabin. That's the first thing I did. And then from there, I needed power so I could pump water so I could grow food. And so we started work. And this is all contextual because this is what the land needed. It wasn't necessarily what I wanted to do. It was like, what needed to make sense to take the steps to get to where I wanted to go. It had to go in this sequence. And so we started building the power system. And so I built in my homestead, I've got this passive solar greenhouse. It's got tropicals in it, all this kind of stuff, has a garage attached to it where all the infrastructure for my electricity system is, for all the batteries, the inverters, charge controllers, all that stuff that's connected to the solar and the generator. It's all there. I needed that. So the Quonset hut went up quick. That went up over in a week. It was fast. It's just a kit you put together. It's a great piece of infrastructure for somebody who wants to get a building on land really quickly. And then we started building the garage, got that going so that I could put the power in. And then I learned about water witching, and I witched my well. Okay. And lo and behold.
Wait, you did it yourself?
I did it myself.
No way.
Yeah. I did it. I found that my body would do it. And they say I think it's something like 1 in 10 men can do it, where most women can do it. I don't know what the reason is for that, but I found that I could do it.
copper rods yourself to do it?
Yeah, I'm walking around and the rods are moving. I'm like, wow, I'm not doing that. Like, this is cool, man.
And you were able to literally find your well that way?
I found my well.
Dude, that's so cool.
Yeah, so I did it.
Did you think it was like super woo-woo nonsensical before that?
No, I was into it, man.
Okay,
I knew.
Did you have some skepticism?
Honestly, I didn't.
Okay.
I think I was a believer.
I believe dowsing is a real thing. I do, 100%. But there is still a piece of me that when some people, especially the people who are on Instagram, like, are aliens coming in the next 2 years? And then
that's like on the furthest
end. And then if you really watch their wrists.
Yeah.
And I don't even think they realize it, because I've had dowsing rods that I've played with, and like I had to check myself a few times. If I wanted the answer to be yes, I would subconsciously just bend my hands inward to make the dowsing rods like.
Well, the way I
inward.
did it to make sure that that I wasn't manifesting that is I closed my eyes and I asked my kids to watch.
Okay.
Or my wife, and I would just like walk around and it was moving, man. And so,
that's so
anyways,
cool. I know it works. I know it's real. I know it's real.
I hit pay dirt. I brought in a well drilling company, and they started drilling. And it's a nerve-wracking thing because it's expensive. Like that well cost me $27,000.
Yeah, man.
But it's like, if you don't have it, you can't do much on your land, right?
Yeah.
So water is so important.
And you don't even have the option, I bet, all the way out there to even be connected to city water anyway.
Not even close.
Not
No,
even
city
fucking
water,
close.
no way. Not even possible.
Or like a municipality
hardly
or,
even municipal
or county.
power.
You guys don't have counties, I guess, but yeah.
Yeah,
you know what
yeah.
I mean.
I mean, because of the topography of my property, even to bring electricity in on the grid was more expensive than to be off grid. And I wanted that. That was part of the appeal of the property. I wanted privacy. I wanted security. I wanted a high vantage point, all the things. And so, it's brought this drilling company in. They started drilling. Pretty much 2 full days of drilling, no water. And I'm going, oh my goodness, like how much time I'm already into it for $22,000, no water yet. But
and this is a spot you douse though, too,
it's a spot
right?
I douse. So hold on. This is a thing I do. It's a thing that I guess because I'm a child of the 90s, before the internet, there was the way to find things out was just to cold call people. So before I drilled that well, I cold called probably a dozen or more different well drillers and water dowsers, conversations, and just asked questions, and just out of my curiosity. Every well driller I talked to, the one question I asked all of them, I said, in your whole career, how many times did you hit a duster? Meaning that you drilled for days and then you never hit water. Only a couple guys said once or twice. The general theme is that if you keep drilling, you'll hit water.
You'll hit water.
There's water everywhere in the earth. It's a whole other topic of conversation, primary water and all that stuff, right? So I was in that mindset and I was like, we're just going to keep going. And we were already 250 feet deep, not a drizzle of water. 260 feet, oh, there's a trickle. And then we kept going. And then it was like, it was my well is 375 feet deep. It was near the end. We didn't hit water until the last 25 feet, basically. Wow. And then boom, not a ton of water, not like Molly Reinhardt's water or Marley Engelhart.
Molly Engelhart, yeah.
Her well's got insane GPM, but I got 10 GPM.
But it's also like you see her pond that everyone swims in for confluence and stuff. It's really magnesium rich water too.
Yeah. So I've got this amazing water, 10 GPM on a mountaintop. The thing that's neat about my well is that I'm 300 feet higher than all of my neighbors. They all live in the valley. Their wells are 500 feet deep. I'm on the mountain and I have a shallower well with higher GPM.
That is so interesting because you would assume that with aquifers, I feel like no one actually has a clue what the hell's going on.
Nobody knows. There. But when you talk to enough drillers, the general thing is the higher you go, the shallower the well.
Interesting.
Because my understanding is that hydrostatic pressure pushes up.
That makes sense. Okay.
So it follows the mountain, and so you can be. And I've looked at properties in my area that have wells that are 100 feet deep on the top of the mountain.
Wow.
So anyway, so I drilled the well, super stoked, got the water, and then I just proceeded to do other things. So once I had the well, then I started the gardens. I started doing earthworks. I dug out ponds. There's no soil on my land. So I had to get the soil from my ponds. So by digging out the ponds and harvesting all the sediment, the high mineral subsoil that's good for the basis of soil, bringing that out with my machines and just building up these terraces and starting.
Did you do any soil amendments?
Oh, tons.
What did you do? What are you a fan of? This is very generally speaking. What are you a fan of?
In terms of soil building?
Yes.
I like all of it, really. I mean...
biochar.
I haven't done biochar. I mean, I'm familiar with biochar. It's an effort to make it. It's hard to buy it. Actually, I did end up connecting with a guy in Alberta who sent me a couple skids of really good biochar. So I have implemented biochar since then. He has this great pelletized biochar product that's amazing. Uh-huh. But for soil, I like to just start with the most coarse materials, because on a mountaintop, you have to build everything from the most coarse to the least coarse. And so I had to build the basis of my terraces with what's called riprap. So I basically would smash up shale rock to build up the foundation of a terrace. And then I'd come in with the least prime subsoil that's rocky and stuff like that, build from there. Then I built a soil screen. And so that I'm screening the soil, and then I'm building a couple feet of good subsoil. Then I'm shaping that into my garden beds, and then I'm bringing in new finished compost or manure.
Got it.
And then going from there. And then now I'm at a point where I green manure my crops. So after crops go out, chickens will usually come in and finish it off. And then I'll plant a cover crop like a fall rye or vetch. and then I'll grow that, and then I'll shred that down the next season, and then start
that acts
again.
as your compost.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm just in a point where, organic matter is just constantly being built up with a combination of green manure and manure from birds, chickens, and turkeys. And because I can't really do ruminant animals on my property, I don't have enough grass.
Oh, okay.
I don't. It's just not suitable.
So no cows.
No.
What about goats though?
Goats, because goats I could go in my forest and all that.
Yeah.
But actually, one thing I didn't mention, while all that other stuff was being built, so I built that Quonset hut, and then I built my garage for all my power and drilled a well. While all that was going, I built a fence that fences in 8 acres of my primary area. So we'll put some drone shots in here, but I'm on 40 acres. But then I've got this 8 acres of fence that really, like my main infrastructure of my homestead, all my gardens and all that is on 2.5 acres. You don't need a lot. You don't need a lot.
You're growing enough to be able to provide fully for.
Yeah. I mean, if the shit were to hit the fan tomorrow, we would be fine. That's basically.
Dude, not many people could say that.
No, I mean, but I've got huge amounts of food surpluses. I've got multiple freezers.
Do you know how to can and also
all
dry?
That stuff, drying, freezing. I do a lot of freezing. I've got 3 big freezers, and I have a food room in the basement of my main home. And then I've got a root cellar, which is where all the living food gets stored: the potatoes, the carrots, the beets, the celeries, the cabbages, all that stuff. 3 greenhouses. And so, so fencing was everything because, like I said, 20 bear incidents is the first year.
What about like quote unquote pests too, though?
Yeah, I mean,
like
deer,
rabbits, deer.
Yeah. I mean, dogs. So I've got 2 healers that are amazing on the homestead. They pretty much keep out all the small pests as far as the mice, the gophers, the rabbits and stuff like that. And then the fence keeps out all the big pests.
Okay.
Do you
have coyotes, wolves?
All of it.
All of it. Yeah,
wolves,
you have to.
Coyotes, cougars, mountain lions, a lot of black bear, the odd
black bears
brown
aren't
bear.
as bad.
No, but they fuck shit up though. Like they come in and smash things.
Oh.
Yeah.
So it's less about like them attacking anything. It's more they're just annoying.
Yeah, they're just annoying. They're just big rats that just fuck everything up, and they can pose a danger to you.
They have cubs.
Not really. If you're the mama bear, for sure. Yeah. So then, it's just like all those pieces. And so the fence happened in all of it. And then the fence really made it so I could really expand out in the gardens. That's when I started doing the food forest in year 3, terracing that. 475 trees. It's
475 trees.
Yeah, but it's a syntropic food forest. So the idea is 75% of the species are just beneficial species.
Okay.
Only 25% are medicinal and food producing.
Okay.
And so the other 75% are sacrificial. They're there to accumulate biomass, fix nitrogen in the soil, and they're sacrificial. And so there's sort of a year 3, 5, 7, and 10 year stage where certain trees come out at certain times as the main fruit and nut bearing trees start to overstory and get big. These other ones come out. So by
literally like come out as in you'll pull them up from the
just
ground?
kill them. Like I'll just chop them down to the ground and then they're done because then they'll get overshadowed by the bigger trees. Yeah. And so
then they're still stealing nutrients from the soil at that point. So it's just better to get rid of them.
Just
after
get rid of them.
Point.
No, they're not stealing nutrients. They're actually fixing nitrogen and growing easy biomass. It just feeds the soil.
So no, I meant though, like at a certain point, why are you getting rid of them then?
Because they won't survive because the bigger trees are just going to choke them out basically. Yeah. Like the big fruit trees and all that. And so by year 10 of the food forest, it'll basically just be shrubs, fruiting shrubs and fruit trees like apples and pears and plums and cherries and all that stuff. And
what are you growing in your greenhouses that are tropical?
So in the greenhouses, I've got, so my main passive solar greenhouse, which is the one that has this flat front, and it's a big infrastructure. It's got a thing in it called a climate battery.
Okay.
So 6 foot deep foundation with packed sand and air tubes throughout the sand with a big HVAC system that basically sucks the heat at the peak of the greenhouse, which would be get up to maybe 140 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
Even in the winter.
Wow.
On a sunny day, and then it sucks that heat and distributes it into a thermal mass.
I remember being on a Zoom call with you, and it must have been like January. I don't even remember when this was. But you were like in a cutoff t-shirt.
Yeah, in the sun. Just like I've got a sun tanning spot up on the rafters.
Yeah.
It's like I call it my solar sauna. I get up there and it is like cooking.
Yeah.
I love it. But I've got figs, banana, castor bean, eucalyptus, lemongrass. I grow bay leaves for cooking. I do very little annuals in that greenhouse now. It's more about lifestyle for grounding. I like to ground, so in the winter I can walk around in a tropical climate barefoot.
Yeah, it's
cool.
It's like
there's like 5 feet of snow on the ground. It's minus 20 Celsius, and I'm in the tropical paradise.
Next, you need to get one of those like surf simulators to put in there.
Yeah, totally. Turn on the misters and feel the humidity. Yeah. So it's more about lifestyle. Is it a necessary thing? Not at all. My main high tunnel greenhouse that has partial heat does everything, and this is what I tell people: in a cold climate, it's about a 3-season greenhouse. You don't really need to have a greenhouse for the winter unless you want to hang out in it and have some fresh things, but you could arguably do those in your windowsill.
Yeah.
In pots or something like that, you know? There's always a cheaper way to do it. For me, with this, I wanted my forever home.
Yeah.
This was like the bucket list. I'm in my early 40s. We had the money. We cashed out. Like we 3x'd the money on our house in Kelowna. We sold at the right time. We bought low and sold during COVID. When I bought that house, my dad was like, don't buy a house. Now the market's going to go to shit tomorrow. Right? Classic. My dad had been telling me this my entire life. And no, we caught the wave and we cashed out, sold that house. And the guy who bought it from me can't even sell it now for what he paid for it. And his mortgage is doubled now because of the market. So that was like horseshoe up my rear end. That was a good timing. And that fueled the first like wave of that build.
Yeah.
And then, just year after year. I mean, there was so many struggles with it, dude. I mean, I cash flowed the whole thing. No mortgage. I have no mortgage.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I'm probably 1.752 million into this Canadian dollars at this point. Still some finishing things I'm doing. It's still not 100%, but it's like 95% there. But a lot of waves. Like I remember after the first year of construction, everything fell apart, lost my main builder, had to find a new one. It would have been after the summer of 2021, it might have been September, I basically shut down for construction for the rest of the season.
Wow. Did you become a GC yourself, or did you always have one?
I don't care about the paperwork, but essentially I'm a GC now because I've managed all areas of construction and oversaw the entire thing and learned all the trades myself. And so, I mean, it's waxed and waned. 2023, I stopped making money. All of my passive income dried up. And then I had to go, oh my goodness, how am I going to continue this? I'm spending $80,000 to $100,000 a month in construction. I've got all these trades I got to pay. I pay all my guys in cash. And so it was, I had to restructure my whole career actually, and then come back. And that's where I got into doing more of my law consulting.
I want to get to that too.
Yeah.
I have a few questions because you mentioned that you've put 1.752 million overall into the property. Is that the cost after having already purchased it for a certain amount, or
that's purchase?
That's purchase too.
I bought my property for $250,000 Canadian.
Okay, got it.
Unbelievably cheap. Why was it cheap? Difficult access, windy driveway. I wanted that.
Yeah.
Off grid, very difficult to get on the grid, so you can't get a mortgage. I wanted that.
Yeah.
So I wanted things that most people didn't want or would be barriers to entry.
Makes sense.
So that's where, like we talked about earlier, about what's your context, what are your negotiables and non-negotiables. This property ticked all these boxes for me that most people didn't value.
Well, the reason I bring this up though is because for someone listening or watching this, you're like, man, I don't have 1 point. I have like,
you don't need it.
Barely 100,000 to throw around. So maybe I barely have 10,000, 5,000, whatever. But like, this sounds intriguing to me. And there's also the aspect of, yes, you can do it without community. I'm sure it would have been much easier had you had like-minded community that you vetted, that you are going in on the property with, that you're living amongst. But then on the flip side of that, I know John Bush, he had that for a little bit and it fell apart, and he's very open about it, you know?
Yeah.
And there's multiple quote unquote intentional communities that have risen up that were really cool, rocking for some time, that absolutely crashed. So there's all those elements, but I would just love to hear from your perspective, how to go about getting land if you're interested in doing that, whether with a group of people or if you have very limited capital, if any capital. Yeah. And then the prospects and the complications and the solutions, I guess you could say, of living together in community, like how that actually is a viable solution, but how to go about doing it.
Well, it's a big subject because community, like I said earlier, you know, people are your greatest asset, but also greatest liability. And in like the case of John, mutual friend of both of ours, all it takes is one bad apple.
Yep.
And it poisons the well. And so there's so much to be said about the vetting process and the establishing of values. One thing I say, because I've consulted on probably dozens of eco villages and intentional communities over the years, is go on a 1 or 2 week camping trip with your core group of directors. Once you've identified who the board of directors are, the board of trustees are, go on a camping trip where you will be tested and you'll see how people operate when the shit hits the fan. Because that's the thing that makes or breaks all relationships. And that's where you need to go. You need to see how people operate under pressure.
Yeah.
And that's how you'll know.
That's why I feel like that's why a lot of people like to take others, like who they potentially hire, whatever, on golfing trips.
Absolutely. Or
because
get them
golfing
really
is
drunk.
such a mental sport too, though. It's like,
yeah.
How does this person perform under pressure?
Exactly. Yeah. Like I had a company in California once where we were building specialty market gardening tools, and we worked at this company out of Japan, and they want to get you drunk. Like that's a Japanese thing, get you really hammered and see how you operate.
Okay.
You know,
I didn't know that was a Japanese thing.
I'm not into drinking, but that's a thing that people do.
I did not know that was a Japanese thing.
That's totally a Japanese thing. They want to get you shit face wasted.
Okay. And again,
it's a
to see how
thing.
you are though.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a corporate thing to see how different you are in different states of mind. But so my homestead is a family compound. That's what I would call it.
Yeah.
There's multiple, it's essentially, then that was the plan. Like when we started all of it, it was like shit's hitting the fan with the COVID show. I'm going to build this thing so that all of our extended family can retreat here and there'll be a place for people to live. And so I have multiple buildings and still building more. Going to incorporate short-term rentals and stuff like that too. How do
you go about that though if you don't have the capital?
You just have to, it's all about the master plan. Is you got to have a master plan, and that will be dynamic to some degree as you find elements that change when you discover things on the property. Like one thing I say to people is, if you want to do a big thing like this, if you can live or visit that property for a year and witness all the seasonal changes, that's huge. You can see how the snow melts, and you can see what happens with monsoon rains and all that, and witness where things change and move, birds coming in and out, and all the things. If you can witness that for a year, when you then do your master plan, then it's super ideal.
What does that look like though? So for like, because you mentioned like off camera, essentially like being able to buy land as a cooperative or something like that, or look at land as a cooperative. Like how do you approach doing that? Like
there's many ways you can do it. The best model that I've seen is either when you have a group of people, and I didn't do that, like mine is mine. But I do have mine in a trust now. All my stuff's protected with a blind trust. So I don't own anything, and the trust has a lien on me, and I'm a debtor to the trust. We can maybe get into that. But
I definitely want to get into that.
So the way I would suggest people do it, the best model I've seen are those guys. They're up in north central Arkansas. They're called Return to the Land.
Okay.
They're a bunch of like white nationalist guys that have basically formed this type of structure. It's a corporate structure. And there's a board of directors, and then people buy shares to get an entitlement to a part of the land. So you don't title anything.
Okay.
So there's no subdivides, because subdivides create legal entanglements,
totally
slow everything down, also create ways. The more you split something up, the more sort of points of entry the state has to come in and fuck it all up. And so if you can protect it under a corporate structure or trust, whether it's a board of directors or a board of trustees, more or less the same thing for all intents and purposes, that's the way I would do it.
Okay.
And then we'll probably do another community. We're going to do one in Central America this winter, and then we'll probably do another one in British Columbia. The one in Central America, we will do into titles, because if people are going to invest internationally, they want the security of knowing that they have a title.
Mm-hmm.
But the one we're doing in British Columbia, I have such a core group in my consulting Rolodex that we just have all the right people already. And then we'll do it under a blind trust. And then there's a board of trustees, and then people buy a share in the trust.
Okay. That still requires that someone involved has a decent amount of capital though. It's just that like...
Or a handful. Yeah. Like, I mean, really, if you got... It depends on the land prices of where you're at. But, you know, if you have 5 people that can put in $400,000...
Good.
You can make a lot happen.
Yeah.
Yep.
Totally makes sense.
Yep.
The one thing I want to talk about next, though, too, is given the circumstances of the state of the world right now, and I know that you're cognizant of having grown up with the dad that you grew up with there is always these predictions that have not come true to this point. Like, oh, it's all going to crash right now. Agenda 21 is coming. That was the big thing back in like 2016, 2017 is like the Clintons and Agenda 21. And if Hillary Clinton got in office, she'd make sure Agenda 21 happened. And then I don't even want to get into the whole Trump thing because I've been personally calling that out from the beginning.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people thought I was crazy, but what I've said has turned out to be true. But with that being said, we have what's occurring with Iran right now, the Strait of Hormuz closure, and I don't want to get into the geopolitics of it, nor do I want to get into, I guess I'll say this. I want to acknowledge first that this realm, from my understanding, is abundant, is inherently abundant. Abundant is a function of the natural world and God's creation. That's just how it is. And the scarcity, in air quotes, that many people experience is more related to the hoarding of resources and creating the appearance of scarcity. That's my assessment of it.
Yeah.
So with that being said, ultimately right now, much of America's farmland, and I would imagine Canada's farmland too, operates with conventional farming, which relies on synthetic fertilizer and also nitrogen feedstocks. And both of those things are 1/3 of, I think both, if I remember correctly, are transiting through the Strait of Hormuz. And the Strait of Hormuz has been closed and quote unquote reopened, where Trump has quote unquote won the war now 25 times.
Every day he's won it again. And yeah.
It's like, it's hilarious. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But with that being said, that has real implications for the food systems that we live amongst. Without getting into conversations on whether, like, well, we shouldn't be using synthetic fertilizer. Yes, I acknowledge that.
Yeah.
We know that. Obviously, we shouldn't. But that's the reality of where most of the food systems in the United States and Canada and in many Western countries are at right now, and that's just the reality.
Yeah.
So with that, I just sort of see this continual drip of tyranny and of more control and restrictions and increasing food prices and increasing costs of labor. And then you have AI coming into the picture, taking up so much of the job market. And so many things are being automated. And it's just like, it's this slow squeeze, or you could say the frog in the boiling pot sort of analogy that's continuing to just drip and happen. But all that to say, I think food security and then also food costs, in addition to that, are going to continue to be a problem over the next few years. So there's prepping with the mindset of just understanding the environment that you're in, all the things I just said, not even from a position of fear, or maybe a little bit of fear that drives positive action.
Yeah, that's
right?
what it does. Yeah.
Right. Versus being in this like doom mindset where you think that the floor is going to drop tomorrow. You think there's going to be a big EMP that's going to be done by China or Russia, as if we're actually ever in conflict with them. There isn't actually one world system that's controlled by banking and the Jesuits and stuff like that, which I tend to think. But you see what I'm saying? And I would just love to hear your thoughts on all that. And like, what would be your advice to someone who is seeing the writing on the wall with these types of things? Like, what would you tell someone? I'm sitting in front of you and I'm like, dude, I'm in a fucking apartment, man. What do I do about this?
Yeah, well, I would say it's all going to continue. It's funny how the agenda has changed over the years, but it hasn't, in the sense that the political flavor has changed, but the agenda to make things more scarce, and particularly petroleum and oil more scarce. It's funny because it's like Trump went from like Obama to be, we need sustainability and the climate agenda. And so because oil is bad, to Trump just making it scarce through sheer economic force.
Yeah.
And the geopolitics of closing but it all ends up at the same.
It's all the same.
We have less resources regardless. So that's the thing that's funny. And that's why I don't get caught up in the left wing and the right wing of all. It's all bullshit. It's all bullshit. It's all the same New World Order.
Yep.
I would say it doesn't matter the details. And I pay so much less attention to the minutia of it now because I've seen the big agenda for so long, and I've seen it, how it continues on no matter whether it's left or right. It's the pendulum moves back and forth, but this agenda keeps pushing forward, which is to go against God's creation and against God's abundance to this manufactured scarcity, the world of the devil. Like, I always paint this dichotomy of like, in one hand, I have the Bible, on the other hand, I have Black's Law Dictionary, and over here, there's the world of God and creation, infinite abundance, and over here, there's the world of fictions and manufactured scarcity that is governed through our consent, but we give it. right?
Give it. Exactly.
And so that's the agreement of God and the devil, in my opinion, but it's a bigger other subject. But I would say as long as you keep moving forward, that's the key. If you don't have the resources, like we talked about the 8 forms of capital at the very beginning of this, we talked about social capital, experiential capital, financial capital, biological capital, whatever it is, find out what you have now and then use that to leverage the others. So you might not have the money to buy a homestead or even start a garden, buy a greenhouse or whatever it is, but you might be able to start learning and get an experience. So you can build out your portfolio, if you will, of the 8 forms of capital and start building these things up that as long as you're moving forward and you're continuing to improve yourself and become more anti-fragile, that's what's most important. And so much of that is networking, getting connected to community. It's also supporting local farmers.
Yeah.
And
huge.
And not even just like prepaying. Like you want to be, if you're buying from a farm you like, and that farm's not on the side of the highway, it'll be one of the first to disappear when the shit hits the fan, proverbially. You want to be the first in line to get food from that farm. And you do that by, say, participating in their prepay CSA. Because a lot of farmers really benefit from getting money up front at the beginning of the season, right? Because their output is low, but their costs are high. And so prepay for your food, build that social capital with the farmer so that you're always going to be in that inner circle that's connected to that farm.
Mm-hmm.
So that extends beyond you.
I want to add to that real quick too. I don't think people understand the degree to which farms that are doing it right, that are not subsidized by the government, that are actually doing beyond organic and adopting regenerative practices, most of them are struggling to make ends meet.
Yeah.
And that's just the reality. And I'm talking about the farms that are not set up with passive income sources and really just growing food for their own sustenance. I'm talking about farms that are growing food and raising cattle and things like this for other people's consumption. Like it is incredibly hard for most of the farmers out there. And that's why I forget the exact percentage, but that's another element of this. I want to say, I had it on that post that I sent you that I made a while back, like a good number, I think 1 in 5 farms, like family-owned farms, have gone under in the last 10 years or something like that.
Yeah, well,
that is wild.
It is wild, and I wrote about that trend in my book in 2016 because the other thing that I
was
observed,
back then too.
Oh yeah, I mean the main thing that's really going on is that the average age of a farmer is getting older and older.
Yeah,
because most farming families, the children don't want to take it over.
Yeah.
And so right now we're going through this great transformation where all these farms are changing hands. And this is another big BlackRock, State Street thing where it's like all these big corporations just buying up tracts of land and real estate, and it's all just going up. And it's like when we were talking last night, it was like, Marx was right. I hate to say it, but this is one of the things that Karl Marx was right on, is that capital just continuously moves its way up. And we're in the throes of it now.
Yeah.
And that's a big problem with our sort of modern day capitalism, which is state capitalism, right? Based on central banking and all that stuff and usury.
That was a wild thing that my friend Tyler had discovered through like what he was dealing with.
Exactly, with water and all that.
That water companies are being bought up by BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street.
In every sector.
Like I'm talking about like water providing companies, not like a Dasani. That's already bad, owned by Pepsi or whatever it's owned by. I'm talking about like your city water.
Municipal water
infrastructure is being bought up by all these corporations.
Just like single family homes and farms and you name it. It's all crazy. It's crazy. So we're kind of like reaching the end of all of that. But I would say, to just get to the thrust of it, it's that you need, as long as you're moving forward and continuously taking steps to increase resilience and your ability to survive in all kinds of different circumstances. And one real, I love first principles, and I have to pull the lens back and think about things in a certain way. So the way I call it is like sovereignty on a sliding scale. So we go from dependency to sovereignty. And this is where you can put into this matrix, you can put food, water, energy, shelter, knowledge of the law, knowledge of money and finance, even AI infrastructure, which is a part of, I think, real community, family compound, off-grid homesteads, now you need hardware AI systems.
Yeah.
This is we could do a whole show on this because I've been into this for a while now.
No, totally. You're talking about like an internal, intrinsic AI system that is not using like...
You're not using Grok.
Yeah.
You have physical LLM that inputs and has agents assigned to design, law, garden planning, you name it. To not use the technology is a risk. So, and you could listen to Mike Adams. He talks a lot about this too. But anyways, thinking about we need agency over our affairs, because if you want to just accept the convenience and the benefits of the system, there's a whole new world order for you, a brave new world, whatever you want to call it, that'll entice you into it, which involves a lack of agency or a loss thereof. On the flip side of it, it's a world of responsibility and increased agency, but you got to do the work. And so I think about everything is that on the sovereignty and a sliding scale, over here we have dependency, over here we have sovereignty, and everything in between. So let's say, for example, you're living in an apartment in Austin, Texas, and you're going, what do I do if the shit hits the fan? Easiest place to start is think about food, water, energy, and shelter. And what's the first thing you can do in there to get a step away from dependency? So you could store 100 gallons of water in your home. So that if the water ever went out, you have some big glass bottles in your basement that you got some water. That's an easy thing to do.
Yep.
You could have a small gas-powered generator. That's an easy thing to do. If the power went out, you could run that generator outside, run an extension cord into the house, and you can get some power. You could have some propane sort of heaters that you would use for camping. If you're in a cold climate and you didn't want to freeze to death in your apartment, you can do that. That's easy. You could have a bug out bag with 7 days of food so that if you had to get the fuck out of Dodge and get on a motorbike and get away, you could survive for 7 days. These are all really easy things somebody could do, right? And so just pick a track and you can say, okay, let's go look at water. First step, have some water stored in your house so that you won't die of thirst in the first 3 days.
Isn't it like 1 gallon per person per day or something
like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jesse's really big on this.
Yeah, you can look that up and have that check done. Yes. Easy. Second step is now let's do some rainwater catchment on our single family home into a 1,000-liter cistern that's on both ends of the house. The rain gutters go in there, little leaf filtration system. Easy. No, like a couple $100, you can do that. Next step is let's dig a pit well in our backyard. Next step is let's have a well. Let's drill a well. And all of these things vary on the size and the scale of your homestead, but these are the steps, right? So you go from water dependency in that I come home and I turn the water on and I hope it turns on, or I flush this toilet, I hope it flushes. Because it's all great until it doesn't work, right? To a point where you're like me and you've got multiple sources of water. And I can get that water with or without power. So we go from water dependency to water sovereignty. It's the same with electricity. You can say dependency, turn on the switches, you hope they turn on, to sovereignty where you've got multiple sources of power and everything in between. And so you just go down the line. And I even think about it in terms of the law is you go from no agency, oh, I'm just a person in the matrix and I sign everything that comes my way because I was told that I had to do so, to a point where you've got everything layered or compartmentalized where you have agency over your life. Yeah. And you pick and choose what contracts you want to be involved in or not.
And see, that's what it's about. It's more about being able to pick and choose, because there are some circumstances, and I know you've talked about them too. For example, a driver's license. Like, yeah, you probably know what you could do with respect to a driver's license. But it's like, do I want the convenience of being able to not be harassed for not having plates on my vehicle and not be harassed for, like, I want to be able to get in a rental car if I travel. Like, that would suck not to ever be able to do that. So for me, and also having kids, like, I'm just going to understand that is a contract that I'm willing to enter into with the state. And it's like each person has to pick and choose, rather than this mindset of, and this is a tough one because it's like a spectrum of principles versus pragmatism as well.
Yeah.
And it's like, I would like to be the person who is 100% in alignment with my principles at all times.
Yeah.
And it's like, contextually speaking, driver's license example is a great one. if I don't have plates on my vehicle, I don't have a driver's license, I get pulled over by a cop and I have my kids in the back of the car.
They're crying in 10 minutes and they're hungry. And now
what if
you're in
it's
the
a fucking
doghouse?
hungry cop too,
Absolutely.
man? That like I'm telling him all the correct things, technically speaking, but he's not fucking trained on the law, dude.
No, of course not.
Like, not even close. So my point is like, pragmatically speaking there, yeah, like I want to be in alignment fully with my principles, but both in terms of the convenience of it and like pragmatically, I don't want my kids to be fucking terrorized seeing a window broken in and their dad pulled out and put in handcuffs. I don't want that shit, man.
In terms of the law, I think I've applied my mentality with farming and off-grid living is I'm a total utilitarian.
Yeah.
And what I tell my clients all the time is, hey, every conspiracy theory is true, but what are you going to do with that today?
Yeah.
And if the information doesn't move the needle for you, what's the point? Because you only have so much time in your life. It's the only thing that we have that's truly scarce. It can't be replicated. It can't be outsourced. You have right now in this life. And do you want to spend 3 months going back and forth with paperwork to fight a $250 ticket? No, I don't.
My friend Daniel brought up a good counterpoint to that. And when you're first dipping your toes in the water in the sovereignty space, if like you can prove you can get a win with like a toll company or something like that. That's different. But yeah, to your point, agree. Just fucking like you don't have to. Is it worth battling over? That's the question.
I don't think it is. And I've been down the rabbit hole with this stuff for so long. We all start with the straw man, and then we go down that and the all caps name. And is it a bond? Is it a security? What is it?
Yeah.
Who cares? I just go, what can I get today that moves the needle for me in my life? And I just look at it that way. And my favorite dichotomy is that there's the world as is and there's the world as it ought to be.
Yeah.
And where are you? And so if I'm in the world as it is, I have to accept the fact that there is this matrix. You and I kind of talked about this many times, is like, that's the paper world of the city of London, that all comes down. And so there's the world of God and creation. On one hand, I'm holding the Bible. And then there's the world of the devil, which is the world of administrative capacity through our consent. But God gave the devil the permission to do it through our consent. So that's why there's a Bible in every court. In my opinion, today, it represents free will. Whether you're a Christian or not, this is how I look at it. And probably in the Muslim world, you could say, well, there's the Quran and there's their legal system, whatever that is.
Right.
And that's how I think about it. And I go, okay, well, there's this matrix and that's okay. I didn't make the rules. But if I want to live a normal life where I'm not just grinding and fighting all the time, I'm willing to accept certain privileges and benefits just for the convenience.
Yeah.
But it's my choice. And the more I know, so going back to my idea of dependency to sovereignty and like say resilience as being the halfway point, what is it? And if I have agency, then I can pick and choose.
Yeah.
That's what it is for me. I don't mind signing on the dotted line, but I want to know what I'm doing and I want to know that it's actually providing me something that's worth it. And if it is, then I'm okay with that.
That makes sense. Quick shout out to Podigy, the team that we brought on to produce our podcast. We started working with them last year and the difference was immediate. Way less stress on the back end for us with podcast production, and our YouTube has grown significantly since bringing on Podigy. If you're already running a podcast and looking to boost your production value, or if you're thinking about starting a podcast, I highly recommend working with Podigy. If you check the show notes, there's an assessment that Podigy has put together to give you specific steps to take to grow your own podcast. And that's whether you're just getting started or looking to take your current podcast to the next level. Each month, they're giving away a strategy call with their founder, Justin Moore, and he is incredibly talented and incredibly smart, and he really knows how to grow a podcast from the ground up. So if you're interested in working with Podigy, just head to the show notes and take the assessment. And if you decide to work with them, just mention Alex Zek in the way forward, and they'll give you a nice little deal. Okay, so practically speaking, what does that look like for you to like pick and choose, have agency? Like how do you interface with the legal system in Canada and also in the United States? And like, how have you set up your affairs to make sure that you retain your agency and sovereignty?
Yeah, the first thing was I had a big transcendent moment because when you get into this stuff, and it's been like almost a 20-year journey for me, I would say.
When you were like back in the day on Winston Shroud type stuff.
I was into Winston Shroud and Gordon Hall and all these OG guys, but it was all American. And so the challenge that the Canadians have is that we have this different system. America has de jure de facto, right? Articles of Confederation, Constitution, and then 1871 Organic Act, DC, the all caps US. Canada, we just got this like Hudson's Bay company that turned into this corporation called Canada that sits at 501 Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C.
And Cal was talking to me about this recently, like how that was sold to a family allegedly, but he doesn't know if it was actually sold like that actual paperwork.
And Cal was the real beginning of my journey because Cal has been a personal friend of mine for now 12 years.
Salt of the earth human being.
Salt of the earth dude. When I met Cal in 2014, we were doing this notice. It was the first incarnation of the notice of liability against this power company called Fortis to get smart meters off our house.
Isn't he the one who came up with that term?
I don't know if he's created the term notice of liability, but he certainly popularized it.
Okay, he popularized it at the least,
and then he certainly, with In Power, and before that it was, what was the other, I forget what it was. It was Josh Soul and all those guys.
Yeah.
Maybe it was In Power, but.
I think it was In Power because that was the name of the documentary.
That's right.
Josh came out with.
So I met Cal in 2014. We did that process. We mobilized 200 people in Kelowna to fill out these notices of liability full of biblical language. And I was esoteric. I loved it. And we made this CEO resign the next day, all filed registered mail paperwork. That's when I saw, holy shit, there is something here, the power of paper, right? But I was still right into the straw man thing, like, the name game. I'm not the man. I'm not the person. I'm the man. All that. I started to shed all of that in 2017 when the Canadian Food Inspection Agency came after my farm, and they sent me an email actually and said, "Hey, we're going to come and inspect you, this, that, and the other." And I did my first sort of conditional acceptance. Like I learned the Gordon Hall method of the 4 doors. You familiar with the 4 doors?
I'm not.
So acceptance, refusal or denial, silence, and conditional acceptance.
Okay, so these are basically like what to do with various offers.
The 4 ways you can go when the state comes after you. And so I found, acceptance and conditional acceptance was everything for the most part. But once you understood the statutory end of the line, you could go silence or refusal too. And that's where I'm at now. And that's where like when I talked about dependency to sovereignty. And so like resilience and security and all these things in between, that's where I'm at now, where I can, if I know, it's like Sun Tzu in The Art of War, know thy enemy.
Yep.
So if I know where the end of the line to an administrative process goes, I'm willing to go silent because I know they're going to take me and I know that they have nothing if that's the case. And so
isn't there a principle that like your silence is your acquiescence too though?
It can be, but sometimes the acquiescence doesn't matter depending on the force of of what they're going to
So it's circumstantial then.
It's totally circumstantial.
Okay, makes sense.
And that's where I went full into the matrix. So in 2017, I just said, forget it. I'm just going to go full administrative process, statutory, reading the articles, and then just knowing where the thing goes.
Got it.
And that was actually super liberating for me because it's like in the movie The Matrix, Morpheus comes in and introduces himself to Neo, kind of red pills him, pulls out the jacks of the head. He's like, this is the real world. You're living in a shithole. But then they have to go back into the matrix to settle.
Yeah.
That's where, for me, it's like this dichotomy of there's the world of God and creation of the Bible, and then there's Black's Law Dictionary. You come out of the matrix to recognize who you are, what you're not, where you are, and then you go back to the matrix, and that's equity, and that's where you settle.
Yeah.
Because you settle in the matrix. And so that's where I've gone full on, is that I just use the statutory system. And so I have found that
so you're essentially finding loopholes in the statutory system.
Makes sense. And now with AI, it's next level.
Yeah, I bet.
We could go down a rabbit hole of like what the future holds. But I really believe that the system will fall apart because if there's gunslingers like myself out there who are using AI to find case law, forget about it. They can't use lawfare anymore because you can have 10 agents of the law digging up all the case law and Supreme Court rulings that you want in seconds. I used to read the stuff. I used to go through and spend days combing through statutes and definitions to find stuff. But so now I'm at a place where I just go, again, I don't mind the driver's license. I don't like the income tax. Okay, so income tax, no problem. What I tell people is I pay all the taxes that I owe, render unto Caesar what is his. And so if I don't owe, but I'm still fulfilling my fiduciary duty, and it's really all about the paperwork.
Yeah.
A movie I would encourage people to watch that's better than The Matrix, that's about The Matrix, is the movie Brazil
Okay. I've
by
never heard
Terry
of it.
Gilliam,
Okay.
which shows this dysfunctional paper system where everything is inefficient, and it just shows that paper world, everything is statutory, and remedy is just finding these loopholes, but using equity as a guiding principle to find the remedy.
Interesting.
That's where I'm at. And so I just go, I'm not intimidated by any letter. I'll just go into the statutes because I know that the world of the devil is an inversion of the world of God. So an analogy I like to use is, imagine a sine wave in an audio form, like you've seen an audio signal. If you're listening to a record, an analog audio signal is a pure form wave. A digital representation is a dotted version of it.
Yep.
Just like how LEDs actually flashing milliseconds, right? So the world of the devil is an artificial construct of the world of God, and it's full of holes. And it has to be that way because that's the universal truth that God said. Yeah, you can make the likeness of, that's why the Bar Association says that we're color of law.
Yeah.
Right? They tell what is law and then what's color of law. There's a difference. And so it's like that with everything, whether you're
say that again though, because that is such a big deal that I think most people don't understand, is that the bar, which is pretty much literally every attorney and lawyer out there. They literally admit that they are operating in color of law,
which is the likeness of.
Yeah.
So over here in God's world, again, the Bible in one hand and then Black's law in the other, this is the likeness of, but not is.
Yeah.
And so when you know that fundamentally and principally, for me, I know there's a loophole through everything because that's the way it has to be.
It has to be. Essentially, it goes back to, I wonder if like at some level karmically, that because it is my position that anyone who's operating as part of any nefarious agenda intentionally require our consent. So they have to give us ways to get out of getting our consent.
And this is why I no longer fear the straw man. There's an assumption, we were talking about it last night with our men's group there, and it was like, okay, do I get my child a birth certificate or not? I didn't get my son a birth certificate for years. And then later I just said, fuck it, because he's going to know from me, he'll be able to take agency and do what he wants. But he has that choice. And the thing is even when you're a person, you still need to sign. Mm-hmm. So the question I have is, if you need to sign, is that not evidence in and of itself that they require your consent?
Yep.
Because if you just had the legal person and therefore that got you into a fiduciary obligation on everything, they wouldn't ask you to sign.
That's such an interesting
They just
point.
put a gun to your head and say, perform. But that's not the way it is.
Essentially what you're saying here is it may not even come to like putting a gun to your head. They would just do stuff when it comes to any relationship between you and the state. They would just do it. They need your signature because signatures in contracts imply consent to the contract.
And so that's the thing. Why?
Yeah.
And so in my philosophical journey of the straw man and sort of my end of the line is, I don't care about the straw man. The straw man is necessary to keep this whole dog and pony show of the world of fake money. Because in the world of God and creation of infinite abundance, a dandelion will produce 10,000 seeds and it grows forever. And that's the world of God and creation. But then in the world of the devil, it's fake money and fake creation through the bonding of these birth certificates, which allow them to borrow money from the fake
through your creative capacity.
Through your creative capacity, because at the end of the day, you're the authorized agent. They still need your signature.
Yep.
So that's why I no longer fear the straw man and care about it. It's like, yeah, I'll be the person.
You can look at it as an interface.
It's an interface because you got to go in the matrix anyways, because that's where everybody is.
Yep.
And so my solution in Canada, because I have friends all the time that are like, oh, you're living in communist Canada. Oh my God, you guys are just slaves. And it's like, dude, I'm living in absolute freedom. I don't have to ask permission for anything. I pay little to no taxes. I just operate as a human functioning in the way I want to function in this world, but I know where I'm going and I know thy enemy. And so I just use it. And for us, it's about layering. And then that's where the trusts come in. So the trust, it's not about, because in the US you have different options. There's
it almost gets confusing because we have the de jure government.
The de jure and de facto, right? And so for us, it's all de facto, but the way we do it is by layering and liens. And so you create a trust. That trust puts a lien on me, so I become a debtor to the trust. Because we know the early days of Winston Shroud and Gordon Hall is all about status, standing, capacity. What is it? Where are you? And it was about reclaiming the birth certificate and all that stuff. So for us, we don't reclaim it, we layer it, and we change our position to be a debtor to the trust.
Got it.
So the trust has a lien on me for $100 million. And if anybody tries to sue me, get behind the lien. I don't own anything.
Got it.
But I still have full control, because the motto of the billionaire trillionaire class is own nothing, control everything.
Yeah, I know.
And so we're
And
just
a lot of
using
people
their
struggle
stuff.
with that because they see the whole Agenda 2030 thing. You will own nothing and be happy. And it's like, there's some truth to that.
Well, there is. And that's the neat thing about the New World Order is that they kind of give us these kernels of truth.
I know.
Because what do you own anyways? Like, you could arguably make the case the only thing you ever own at any time is the clothes on you.
100%.
As soon as you walk out of this room,
vehicle,
you're no longer in the room.
Well, it's also like a vehicle. Like, do you actually own the true title to that?
Yeah.
Also, I'll tell you offline, I have a wild story from one of my family members that like they were able to actually see a true title for a vehicle and be like, oh my God, this whole thing is actually true.
Well, yeah. And that's a whole neat rabbit hole, but it's a cool philosophical process to go through, because once you let go of it, it's like, who cares?
Yeah.
And that's where the paperwork, it's like, okay, is it a property or is it a title? Is the title a piece of paper, or is it the actual place? And then you can think about common law in the sense that, well, I'm living on the land, therefore I'm there, therefore I own it as I'm the custodian of it. One thing I say to people is, if the government can't kick junkies squatting out of a home, how hard is it going to be for them to kick you off your property?
Yeah.
So drop the fear. Like in my consulting practice with all this, the first thing I do with people is just try to show them how much of a dog and pony show it is.
Yeah.
And it's all just bullshit.
Because you've had experience yourself too with that, like with permits on your property and stuff like that.
Permits and all that kind of stuff, where I just basically found out where their procedure ended. And then I just was able to say, go ahead, do your worst.
Yeah.
Knowing where it ended.
Yeah.
But sometimes it ends in a place that you don't want to go. And then that's where other remedies would come in.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I think the whole law and sovereignty conversation can be really confusing for so many people though. And I know like a lot of people that have been burned in a variety of ways too. And like, there's also the element of, at least from the US context, that there's a lot of genuine teachers out there who had processes for discharging things or whatever processes there were that were actually working at some point that stopped working. And it's like, there's elements of the government figures out that people have found this process, which really, for all intents and purposes, is a type of loophole. And then they close that loop and make it so it's either really hard to do or make it so it no longer works at all. So then that person who was genuine looks like a charlatan because the process is no longer working. He's like, no, I promise it was working.
Yeah.
Now I got to figure something else out. But the point is, I can see where, first off, from the average person, it's like, I know there's some kernel of truth to what these guys are saying, but let me see it in practical application. And there's a lot of people who haven't seen that yet. I personally have. Like, I actually have like seen some shit work, even in my own life. And I'm like, okay, this is real. Like, we were talking last night with my friend Daniel, like he's also seen that in his own life where he's like, oh my God, this is real. But then at the same time, there's so many people who haven't ever seen that. And then they hear all these grandiose things from influencers on social media who are just blasting it everywhere.
Which is dangerous.
Which is dangerous in and of itself.
Yeah.
And there's an element of, I think, at the least in the US, the cat is out of the bag for a lot of these things related to the IRS. So I don't know that it's as dangerous as it would have been like 10 years ago, 5 years ago.
Yeah.
But it still could be dangerous. I completely agree. Nor do I condone like the people who are blasting different remedies like out into the public on these massive platforms. Like specific remedies is what I mean, not just generally speaking about different approaches. But I would just love to hear from your perspective, your experience in this space, how to spot someone who is like a genuine teacher, that is just a teacher that is there to teach you like what they know, versus someone who is a total scam. Yeah.
I mean, there's so many things you touched on there that
I know that was a lot.
We could go, okay, so one thing is like, why is that? Well, why is it that there's all of a sudden this explosion in this information? There's a number of reasons. One is there's demand, huge demand, right? People want freedom. Dude. People are tired of this shit, right? Two is that I think, frankly, the powers that should not be, if we're in a race, they're way past the finish line and we haven't even started, that I don't think they care anymore. I think for the most part, they only care about the 95% of the sheeple that will just go along with whatever.
I want to talk about that too. Towards the end of this, because like there's a divergence. I wonder if they like fully let us go.
I want to get into that too, the bifurcation, because I've got I've been thinking about this for a long time, and that they don't care, but also so I had this experience when I was on this journey of the law. It was around 2018. I had a guy reach out to me who was like, hey, you don't know who I am. I know who you are. I watch your stuff. I took one of your courses. I like your farming stuff. You're saying things about the law, and I really want to help you and get you on the right track. And he's this unnamed guy. You'd never hear of him. I got on a flight to Toronto to have a 4-hour lunch with this guy, and then I flew back home. I learned he put more things together to me in that 4 hours that crystallized. It wasn't new information, but it was like, okay. The biggest takeaway was there's a rule of the matrix. And the rule is you can bring people out one at a time, but you can't rock the boat. And so the analogy he gave me is he said, imagine we're on the Titanic and there's only 2% of the people or 1% of the people that aren't drunk and being belligerent. And we all see we're moving to the rock and the boat's going to crash. And we go, what do we do? If we tell everybody on the boat that we're going to crash, we're going to cause a panic, and then probably nobody will survive. But if we come together and in orderly, get in single file and just get women and children first on the boats and then make sure that they're safe, a greater number of us will survive, knowing that the majority will be lost. That is certain. But what do we want to do right now to get there? And so that's been my MO. And so in terms of remedy and all of that, well, and the other thing he told me is he was followed by the Secret Service for a number of years because they were blowing the whistle on the securities and they were discharging.
Wow.
And what this
guy in his group,
yes,
essentially.
And this is in early 2000s, and there was a couple guys that went on YouTube, and I won't name names, but they went too public about it. And then they started changing stuff. And so you've also seen this as well, that there was a time when people were discharging and it was working. And there are people still discharging now and it is working, but it's becoming increasingly challenging. Yeah, and typically it's discharging when you're in trouble opposed to getting a free home.
Yes.
Necessarily.
Yeah.
And that's a nuanced conversation. But yeah, so I find the way I look at it, because I'm so utilitarian with this law stuff, is I just go, well, the vast majority of people don't even pay taxes anyways. So most people don't care about the information or will benefit from it. And the reality is,
I can't tell you how many friends I have that like I talked to them about this stuff and they're like, dude, I've just never filed and like nothing's happening.
Well, and some people, hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I wouldn't advise people to do that, but hey, whatever.
Right.
But the reality is most people can't benefit from the information and most people will not execute either. So my MO has been like, you can keep it in the private. So my buddy who was followed by the Secret Service of Canada basically sent a letter to the minister and said, I'll take it private. And he had this white van following him everywhere for years. Okay, this sounds cryptic and weird, I know, but he had 2 men in black following him around everywhere, and they would kind of bully him and say, hey, you keep talking about securities, because that's the golden goose, is the securities.
Yep.
And he said, I'll take it all private. All of a sudden, the white van stopped showing up. And so he said to me, I advise you that if you're going to go on this path, keep it private and keep it one at a time. And so that's how I work with clients on a one-on-one basis. And it's not about scaling an online business like my other things I've done in the past. It's just about quality and care and making sure the right people are getting the right information and they do it properly.
And you're white gloving.
And I do white glove. I just, people come to me and I just do it all. And so that's the difference. A lot of guys that I learned from the US and even some of the guys in Canada, they were like, teach a course and then have a weekly call and then get other people to do this stuff. And then all these tsunami of problems come back and then they can't manage it. And so for me, I have zero interest in trying to wake people up to the matrix. I'd rather just mobilize some people that see it and are willing to just take the steps.
Makes sense. Totally makes sense.
Work with the people that are already converted and forget the masses, because maybe we go into this now with that topic of bifurcation is that I just think where we're going, especially when you look at the AI slop, the economic conditions that we're in, the fact that there's all these like transgendered men that are just like demented, and we live in this the cycle of weak men to strong men and that whole cliche, right? Is that it's like, forget it. You're not going to change all this. Focus on the here and the now and who you have and go with that. And I think we could have this really amazing potential where we just say, forget it. And it's kind of like the book Brave New World, where it's like, there's the Brave New World that's in that matrix, and then there's the savage lands. And that's all of us living on regenerative farms and communities. And they'll leave us alone as long as we don't try to take down the matrix. The matrix will kill itself.
Yep.
It will destroy itself over time. That's God's fulfillment, I believe, that has yet to be fulfilled, but that's the prophecy. And so all we got to do is stay the course, take care of our children, and build our communities and just foster this thing and just build. Focus on building.
I think so many people struggle with, again, going back to the land thing and all that piece. Like, I think there's solutions there where you pull enough people, and even if you yourself don't have any money, you could say like, hey, I will volunteer my time to be a part of this community. There's ways to do it.
There's always a way in.
It's just like, I think so many people, it goes back to they have paralysis by analysis. These days, there's so many people that know exactly what they should be doing, but they're just like, man, it's either a bandwidth thing because people are being squeezed right now financially in many ways, or it's also the paralysis by analysis thing where it's like, I don't even know where the freak to start.
Or the third thing is they just don't know how to show up with value.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing, again, going back to those 8 forms of capital, understand what do you bring and be honest with yourself. Don't check in with people who are always keep friends around you who are willing to tell you the honest truth, whether it's good or bad. You need friends and family close to you who have said to you in the past, look, I know you're not going to like the sound of this, but I think you should really consider this and look at this thing you're doing and try to fix it. If you have a friend like that, keep that friend really close because they help you come back to center, to be honest with yourself.
Yep.
And if you can be honest with yourself and know how to create value, that's the key. You can't just show up at Joel Salatin's farm and be like, hey, Joel, do you need a farmhand? It's like, what can you do to offer a guy like Joel Salatin value right now?
Yeah.
And it might be in a way that you didn't think was possible or that you didn't think you could do, but you gotta lead forward. And it's like in marketing, I remember I heard Gary Vaynerchuk say this years ago, is like give, ask. So that was my whole growth in my marketing online journey, was like, just give so much information and so much value that you build this like massive pool of goodwill, and then it comes back. And so we can all start that journey somehow, but that is the way, is to show up with value.
Yeah. Amen. Yeah. And get over the paralysis by analysis too. I think, again, that's such a big one. One thing I want to touch on one more time though, for people who are listening and watching, what you guys have done with Freedom Farmers, I think that's like really important to harp on, how you've developed ways that people can easily find land near them.
Yeah.
Do you have any resources in addition to that on different strategies on how to pool together money with people? Are you working on anything like that?
Yeah, we have some courses in our platform that, anybody watching this will get access to for a month, that talk the ideas and stuff we've put together on how to transition from city to country. As far as pooling resources, it's a real mixed bag because everybody's got all kinds of situations,
all unique,
right? It's so unique and nuanced. And so, I would say there's many different ways to get money, borrow money, friends and family. Well, here's the thing.
Let me answer that question for myself though, dude.
Yeah.
And this is just the reality. Like, when it comes to the situation like that, if you want it that bad, you'll figure it the fuck out.
That's just the thing.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
You will figure it out if you really want it that bad. And like, how bad do you actually want it? You don't need someone else to tell you exactly what to do on that. Obviously, the whole point of a podcast, we can seed ideas and plant them into you, and then they might grow if it's something that resonates with you. But when it comes to something like that, it's like, if you want it that bad, if you don't have the financial capital, you have other forms of capital, probably, you'll figure it out, man.
Yeah, you'll figure it out. Yeah, you just got to find the right people. But I mean, what we've done at Freedom Farmers, one of the things that I'm most proud of is that, when we were talking earlier about how to find land, I was talking about the 11 scales of permanence, and I was talking about negotiables, non-negotiables, and all of that. It's, I trained a team to basically do this process. And so at first I published this course that showed the process, and it's on our platform. People can watch it and learn for themselves if they want to do it themselves. But we published this course and we just had a bunch of realtors reach out to us and we're like, why don't you guys just do this? And so we said, okay, well, let's just try it. So I think we're on year 3 or 4 of this now, maybe year 3. And what we created this program called Homestead Accelerator, where basically we go and find land and then it goes through this filtration process. So the property's got to have food, water, energy, and shelter, capacity of it. So you got to have a place to grow. It's got to have the right infrastructure as far as a barn, good access, 2 sources of water. Is it on grid, off grid? All these things are listed. And we just list properties so people could sign up for this today for free for a month and go on our list and probably find a property that you're 95% of the way there on.
That's amazing.
So that you don't have to spend months or years driving around the US to find a place. And most of our properties are in the US. We vetted it already. It's going to have, and we do the research on the climate data, wind speed, annual rainfall, snowfall, all of these things.
Super in depth.
We eliminate threats. So none of our properties are going to be near anything toxic.
Yeah.
Data centers are on our radar. We're using the maps, like the Aaron Brockovich maps and all. We're on it.
Yeah.
So no property on our list is going to be bad.
They're
awesome, all good.
Man.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get Erin on the show. I've already reached out to her on Instagram because
Okay.
she's doing amazing work with the data center stuff. You mentioned earlier your late wife, and I know that you and I were talking a lot through that process, and Katie ultimately passed due to cancer. Yeah, I don't know where you want to start with that, man. Whatever's on your heart to share, like the grieving process or just the process of witnessing someone go through that. What's on your heart to share related to that?
Yeah, it's such a crazy thing that you never think that kind of thing can happen to you. But I guess the grieving was a whole other, really year-long process that went in all kind of crazy waves. And I did all kinds of crazy things because I didn't know where the fuck I was and who I was. And then all of a sudden being responsible for everything in my family, having a wife that was like a superhuman as far as a mother who could provide. And then all of a sudden that's gone. And then you have to do all those things. And
she was really you could say, I don't want to speak for you, but gone before she was gone in that capacity at least.
Oh yeah.
Because she was hanging on for quite a while, but her capacity to be that way as a mom. I know you and I have had conversations.
Oh yeah. And you were with me along the whole way, man.
Yeah.
I mean, I was you and I were talking on the phone multiple times a week. Cause I was she just didn't want to do anything that was allopathic.
Yeah.
And she was steadfast. My wife had an unbelievable amount of willpower and capacity to handle pain. And ultimately, that's what it was for her. It was her past pain that she could never let go of.
Yeah.
That she chose to hold on to, and stuff that happened to her when she was a child that she couldn't let go of. And I knew so long, because I remember when I was talking to you about so many things during all that time, I was like, man, if it involves changing her mindset, I don't know if she's going to do it.
You're right. I do remember having that convo because I was talking to you about from the lens of German New Medicine.
Well, that's the thing. And then, and we went down that road for a while too, but it was almost too little too late. And I think overall, we were on a soul journey and we had a contract. And I met Katie in high school.
Mm-hmm.
I met Katie when I was 17 years old. And I had a huge crush on her in high school. She was a hot blonde girl who had a nose ring and a tattoo. And I was a punk rocker.
You're a punk rock guy.
I was like, this girl is so badass. It's so hardcore. And then we met way later in life and came together. And she just was this super mom. But, postpartum, 2 miscarriages after our last child, really. And then all this past trauma was an accumulation of all this stuff in her that her body didn't want to let go of.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot to be said about grief. We could talk about that. But I think the one thing that I would say to your audience, knowing what I know about you and watching as much of your podcast as I have, is that most illnesses, this is what I believe. You can call me crazy or I'm not going to back up the science. I'm not that. Paul Leenders has become a really good friend of mine.
Love Paul.
Was kind of with me a bit near the end of Katie's journey, but it was, is that most illnesses, I think, are your state in your mind, and cancer in particular is an accumulation of negativity in your body is an energy flow that you never let go of. And I think that's what it was for her. And if I could wave my magic wand and go back in time, I would have said, let's only do this. But her and I were listening to your podcast, and we had all these mutual friends in our world that gave so much time to us, and I'm so grateful for that. But it was, I think, at the end, she went on this path because her soul wanted that.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's
also,
fucked up thing to say.
I can imagine
but
this too. That in the moment, in those situations, there's it's easy to pontificate from the outside of that experience of cancer that's that aggressive and say, oh, here's what I would do. But when you're in it, man, I can't even imagine the cognitive dissonance, oh, are we sure about this holistic thing?
100%.
For sure? How do we, I couldn't even imagine, dude.
We went through so many types of protocols and none of that stuff really matters. I think at the end of the day, it was the past trauma that she'd been through in her childhood.
Her perception of it, essentially.
And her perception of it. And she didn't want to fully confront it because it was too painful.
Yeah.
That was the thing that, I don't know, man. It's a hard thing to try to find meaning in.
Yeah.
Losing your wife and the mother of your children, it really is a difficult thing. But yeah, I mean, as I experienced it and all that, I mean, I've always just been a guy who's a problem solver.
Right.
That's who I am.
It's also typical of guys, especially when they're dealing with their wives' emotions. It's okay, let's solve this.
Yeah, let's just tell me what to do and I'll solve it. And that's what it was for for almost 2 years. It was just do this, do that. I mean, I went into debt to try to save her. If I wanted to just throw her into the conventional medical system, we could have done that forever ago and I wouldn't have been in debt for it. And we could have done that. Chemo, radiation, all that stuff. Canada does all that stuff for free, but we didn't. She didn't want to. And we had the resources to not, so we didn't.
Yeah.
But yeah, hindsight being 2020, everything is, okay, well, I should have done this. I shouldn't have done that.
I'm sure you can just tear yourself up.
Oh, and that's the grieving thing, dude. I mean, that's where.
What if I did this? What if I did that? What if I spoke sooner? What if I can't even imagine.
Because my mind fires so fast all the time, I went through this hyper time thing where I was just thinking constantly of all these things I could have done. And I remember a huge moment for me in kind of skipping way ahead to the grieving of it was that there was this moment where she was in pain for probably 4 months. And it was absolute hell on earth in our home, because she didn't want to even take painkillers. My wife was insanely tough as nails. She could handle pain and had a history in her teenage years where she would cut herself. And she had this dark, past where she could take pain. And so she kind of liked it in a way. Not that she liked putting our family through that, but it was so difficult. And my children watching her being in so much pain that after she'd passed and, at the last 2 weeks of her life, we were in the hospital. Okay, well, now we'll just throw everything conventional at her because it's what else are we going to do at this point? Here we are. We're not going to do all this trauma unwinding and it's too late. She's already in pain. The tumor is explosive ulcer on her body and all of this. And it was just so much hell that when she had passed, there was this period of, I finally don't have to just constantly run around doing all this stuff. And my kids don't have to dance around on eggshells to not make a noise to set her off to get in her pain, because she only had an hour where she can sleep where she's not in pain. And so I remember there was this period where it was a couple years after her, or a couple of weeks after the ceremony of life, when I'm laying in bed with my kids in our new home, which Katie, there's one thing I want to say to people is this is how important a relationship is, a nuclear family in the journey of building a homestead and all that is without the support of your wife, you have nothing.
Yeah.
I couldn't do anything that I have done up until this point without her. It was all because of her. And the thing that was so crazy and tragic and poetic in a tragic way was that she got us the whole way there and then left when we got there. And I struggled with that for a long time in my grieving. But I remember laying in bed with my kids and it's 6 a.m, sun comes up I'm laying there and I have my 2 children that I love. And I'm like, everything is perfect right now in this moment. And I felt God's energy and love on me. And I just felt like everything here is how it's supposed to be. And then at that moment, I just said, okay, we're going to embrace every stage of grief. And then I remember getting Katie cremated being at the crematorium. And then there's like cliche folder on like, here's the stages of grief. And I just remember reading that being like, okay, I'm just going to experience every stage of grief. And this is a thing I learned from our friend Paul in his 15-step process to unwind. Because I actually had a tumor growing in my chest after Katie passed. And it was like sticking out of my collarbone here.
Interesting.
And I knew what it was. And I was like, because I had been under so much stress for 2 years that I felt like that's what it was. And so
makes sense.
And I just embraced every stage of grief. I expressed every stage of anger and regret and all of it. And I just said, we're going to live it and be in the moment, but let it move through us. And dude, a couple months later, it was gone.
Interesting.
That tumor was gone. And so ever since then, that's just been my MO. And then, I just felt like Katie's spirit was pushing me, and I did crazy stuff. Like I was like blinded by my sheer will. Cause I've always been this guy. It's just like, I have a problem. I'm going to solve it.
Right.
And like, okay, I lost my wife. I don't have a mother for my children. I don't have a homemaker. I don't have a homestead partner. And I like tried to move on really quickly. And I got a lot of criticism for it. And like hindsight being 2020, should I have done it the way I did? No, but I was in my shit.
Yeah.
And I didn't know.
I think I recognize that too. And like, I feel bad as a friend because I should have spoken up a little bit more, because I do remember having a conversation with you where you said pretty soon after, like, I feel like I've moved into acceptance. And in the back of my mind, it was a delicate thing because you had just lost your wife and I didn't want to, but in my mind, I'm like, bro, I think you're still grieving.
No, and you're right. And I didn't realize it until like and this is a cliche to say, but it's so true, is that grief comes in waves. And it was like, I'd met this woman. I had this crazy experience where I put this out online. I had like this crazy experience where for 4 days in a row, I had women coming at me and I was interviewing women for 4 days in a row. I was on the phone for like 16 hours a day, FaceTiming with women that were like, wanted, like I put myself out there. Again, would I advise someone to do that? No. If I would have known who I was then as I do now, I wouldn't have done it, but I did it. And that was my journey, and it was silly, and we make mistakes and we do things. We're blundering around in this life, just like figuring it out. Right. But I met this woman and we had this like crazy serendipitous experience where I felt like Katie's love pushing me to go and experience something else, to figure out what you want, and so that you know what you want and what you don't want. And so I did that, and I met this incredible woman. We had this really cool serendipitous synchronicity thing, and it was far out, and it kind of fizzled out, but I felt like I had to do that to figure out how I'm going to be a single parent on an off-grid homestead, the guy that I am. How am I going to do all that? Mm-hmm. And so I was kind of had to it was like fucking around to find out.
And do you think like part of it too, that you had to go through those experiences in order to realize like, no, dude, I'm seeking outside of me and I'm still actually grieving and I need to deal with this situation?
Dude, I mean, I remember it was in August, and I'm dating this girl. It was a long distance thing, and it was complicated and logistically challenging. But I remember in August, I just hit this like bottom of a wave where I was just like waking up to the reality of my situation. And there was moments where I would just like wake up in absolute sheer terror, knowing that it's me and my kids.
Yeah, man. I can't even imagine.
Like on this fucking homestead and all this stuff that I have to do. I'm like, this is insane. I would almost like wake up in this sobering reality, like all the things that I have to do on a day-to-day basis and provide for my kids, because my kids aren't getting what they used to get. It's different now. And it's like,
and you built this for your wife and your kids.
Exactly.
Now your wife's not there to experience it.
And I even designed our home around the way we lived as a family and all that. And it's just like crazy, crazy experience. You don't know, you don't even think this could happen to you, but that's life. And the thing that I always come back to center on is like, you signed up for this life. We were talking a little bit about last night, like, is it reincarnation or what is it? My personal belief, and I believe in Christ, and I don't call myself a Christian, but I do believe in Christ, and I believe in the Bible and all this. But I also believe that we have these soul contracts, and we come in and we get injected into this body, and you are going to get the full human experience. And that's what I tell myself is like, you signed up for this life, man.
Yeah, I know.
And
anytime I'm on in hard times too, I'm like, when I start feeling a little bit of victimhood, which like there's parts of you that needs to entertain that in order to get past the victimhood. Ironically, the other piece of me though is like, hey buddy, I know you know deep down you signed up for this shit.
Yep. And it's full of all kinds of things. It's full of absolute love and abundance and achievement and striving to the lowest point where you fucking lost everything, but you didn't. And there's a silver lining in things. And it's like, hey, that's the human experience, man. It's full of life and death.
Yeah.
And so what are you going to do with that now? And so are you going to just be depressed forever? Are you going to throw in the towel? I mean, look at what you have. And again, it's like taking stock of what you do have and having appreciation for those things and those moments and those people around you. And yeah, and you have to just move forward.
Yeah.
This
is a big question, but how have you been able to find meaning in that experience aside from like I signed up for this. This has taught me to appreciate life more and the little things and my children. Like what are the big pieces? And you may not know the answer to that yet.
Yeah, I'm probably still figuring it out, because I still think about it every single day.
I mean, how could you not?
How could you not? Right?
Yeah, how could you freaking not?
Yeah,
it'd be hard to not think about it every moment of every day.
Well, that's kind of how it is, actually. But I feel like she's always with us, and that's just, we have an angel, that's there, looking after us and pushing us through and guiding our decisions. And there's no judgment, and there's no pain, and there's no fear. And it's just, I think it's like, in a way, it brings me comfort because I'm so close to the other side, having lost like the woman who was perfect for me in every respect. Her astrology, her human design, our context in our life and how we came together. We were perfect for each other in everywhere. Was our relationship perfect? No, nobody's is.
Nobody's is.
Everybody's relationship is full of challenges when you start building a family and a homestead and all those things. But it's like, so now I just feel this like really close connection to the other side. And I can honestly tell you that ever since this horrible thing happened to my children and I, the crazy amount of spiritual signs that we've seen has been pretty far out.
Yeah.
And so I do feel blessed in some way that I have this guide and this guardian angel that's there paying attention and giving me signals.
Yeah. That I'm still with you type of thing. And
totally.
You're on the right track type of thing. Yeah,
totally. And I see it in my kids' eyes every day.
Man. Well, we may have to do another one when you're, I don't know if you ever get past the grieving process in a situation.
I don't know
like
if you do. And I think I've kind of relinquished that matters.
Yeah.
Like,
goes back to like falling in love with the process of a thing, like ironically.
Yeah. It's like the life being the journey and not the end. And it's like, it is. But I mean, the thing that's crazy about my journey is I had 3 deaths in my life that all became more significant as my life went on that prepared me for Katie. The first death I had in my life that was significant was my best friend, Josh O'Connor, when we were 18 years old. He was a drummer in my band, unbelievably talented guy. He was like crazy. He was like native guy, grew up on a reserve and like had all the conditions to make your life really shitty, alcoholic, neglectful father, abusive, whatever. But for somehow, this kid was a straight A+ student in everything you can imagine. English literature, music, drama, arts, unbelievable, like next level genius. We're cliff diving one day when we're 18 years old, right after our graduation of high school. He jumps off the cliff, hits the water, dies.
No way.
Me and all my buddies, we watched him sink. They couldn't find him for 2 weeks. Massive trauma.
Oh my God. That's
I was
a lot,
like
man.
shocked. It took me probably 10 years to get over that. And still some, like, again, you don't know if you ever do, but that is always with you. The next one was I lost my dad during the COVID show.
Oh,
my dad, who I was so close to, especially later in my life, having a family and being an entrepreneur, having all these things that I could connect with my dad with, because when I was younger, we didn't connect that much. But my dad took the shot and died of a stroke.
Oh, man.
Of all, a truther dad.
Yeah.
And when COVID was, I was like, Dad, this is the same shit you've been telling me about forever. But he had this wife that just like put all this fear in his mind and whatever. He took the shot, but I was there with him his last 4 days. Significant loss in my life. And then my wife. And having been so close to significant experiences in death prepared me that like when Katie was in the hospital in the last 2 weeks, I pretty much knew that this was it.
Yeah.
And I started kind of preparing my children for it, which was really hard to like have that conversation with your kids.
I can't
like,
even imagine, bro.
Guys, like, there's a chance that mom, it might not come back from this. And, when we're around mom, we have to just be really gentle and quiet and just, and don't bring the fights into mom's room and oh my God. But, I had started kind of like mentally preparing for that when it did happen, I think that allowed me to kind of just like move on with life kind of quickly. Was I done grieving? No. Am I proud of all the things that I'd ever done? And no, of course not. But that's life, man. We fucking make mistakes and I'll own that. And, it is what it is. It's my journey, and everybody's journey is going to be pretty unique.
Yeah.
For your whole life context and who you are at that moment, knowing what you know or what you don't know. Here you are. You're a human having the full human experience and you're just fucking thrashing around hoping to figure it out.
Well, I know that the 6 months preceding her death, both me and several other of our mutual friends had many, many conversations with you because you were just trying to like figure out how to go about helping her heal. And then it turned into like, how do I like make sure she doesn't die? And then it turned into like, how do you were, I mean, dude, the amount of conversations we had and other people, and it's like, it's such a tough one. And I agree. It is a part of life, but when it's someone who's the mother of your children, I hesitate to even let my psyche go there. I can't even imagine.
It's so hard. And that's where I was like,
yeah.
I remember you and I having all these conversations, months before she passed, and like starting to come to that realization is terrifying.
Yeah. I can't even imagine.
But I think part of one of the biggest things I've learned in life is that if you want to achieve great things, on the flip side, really bad things can happen.
Yeah.
I mean, Jesse and I have said many times, it's like epic things happen to epic people. And you're better built than a lot of people would be to handle such a fucking tragedy.
Yeah.
And that's kind of
it's like the analogy of like the deeper the roots, the higher you go type of thing.
Yeah. Like the deeper the roots of the tree, the higher the tree.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. I've always had this real like sense of spiritual connection, knowing that, and then I don't fear it. And so it's just kind of like, you have to be willing to look into the darkest places of yourself and your life to get through the other side.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's confronting the demons in you and in people around you.
Yeah.
And that was the thing that was really difficult in Katie's journey, is that in her pain, the demons came out.
Yeah. Like the unprocessed stuff, essentially.
Yeah, man. And just like what a person says and does in the throes of pain is hard to describe on how fucking horrifying.
I can't imagine. I mean, shit, I think of myself on moments I have back pain, bro. Like I can't imagine
who do you become?
Level. Yeah,
no,
that level of pain.
It's crazy. And then what your kids see and all of that. And man, it's but yeah, like, I've been in therapy for 5 months now, and it's been pretty amazing. Somatic therapy, I've done some. I've been on a pretty incredible healing journey. My daughter too. My son was so young that his journey with it, he might not understand until he's 20 years old.
Yeah. Makes sense.
My daughter and I, though, we've been absolute kindred spirits in this whole journey, and it's brought our family together.
Yeah.
In a huge way.
That's huge when that can happen after something like this.
Yeah. But man, I wouldn't wish this upon anybody, but at the same time, like, here you are, you're in this fucking meat jacket, and you're in this experience, and we all die.
Yeah.
And so that's a reality that everybody will face at some point, and you will lose the closest people to you at some point.
Yeah.
And you'll be lost as well. But are you lost, or are you coming back home?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a
And
beautiful
so
way to look at it.
that's how that brings me a lot of comfort now, is like, yeah, she just went home, and we'll go there too eventually.
Amen, man.
Yeah.
Amen. This was a long one. So thank you for sitting here with me for this long, dude.
Yeah, brother.
Talked about a lot of stuff, a lot of medicine in there. So
Totally.
if you're listening or watching this, if you're interested in Freedom Farmers or anything else that Curtis mentioned, just head to the show notes and I'll be there. Curtis, thanks for being with me, man.
Yeah, man.